I'm live. Oh. Now, is it actually working? So just in case it is actually working and you can hear me, I'm about a minute and a bit early. So I'm going to make sure that I can see myself on my other machine so I know the Australian internets have not just gone to crap and stuff works. Yes, it works. All right, Martin, cool. All right, first of all, thank you for someone turning up and actually adding something. That's good. I don't have to go to my prepared notes, maybe. So if you have questions, think about what your questions are. Otherwise, I'm just going to ramble for a while until people have questions. But I am still going to get this up on my other machine so I can see what the latency is. This is like MacGyver Ninja Trick 101. Like, I'm talking here, how long does it take to actually stream up to the webs and back down? That's not too bad. Alrighty. Okay, I've got live stream. People say it works, which is good. I've got backup machine. I've got beer. I've got spare beer. So I think we're good for a while. Alrighty, so CloudFlare caching tips. Use it. So CloudFlare caching, for those of you who have maybe not read the bits and pieces I've written, what's really neat about CloudFlare, they've got about 155 edge nodes around the world at the moment, which means that a huge majority of the population is somewhere very, very close to an edge node. If you can serve content from their cache, so from one of those edge nodes, you're going to serve content not only from your origin so that you don't have to bear the overhead of serving that, but you're also going to get super fast responses. In fact, I saw a quote from Martin Prince, the CEO, on Twitter recently. He put a tweet out, and he said their goal is to get 99% of the world's population within 10 milliseconds latency of a CloudFlare edge node, which is super cool. So your trick now is sort of how can you get as much content as possible served from cache in an edge node close to people and take the traffic off your origin. Now, that's hard if you've got to do things like read a database or commit something to a database. It's easy if you've got static images, style sheets, JavaScript files. The home page of Have I Been Pwned, for example, is really aggressively cached. And just for anyone who's curious to see what is actually cached request-wise, I'm going to go to Have I Been Pwned in Chrome. And I know I'm not broadcasting this to you, but if ever you're in your dev tools and you go to your network tab and you do a search for like test.example.com, and I go, is it pwned? And I have a look at the response. You'll see there's actually a response header called CF cache status. And I got a miss on that because I only cache searches for email addresses for about 10 minutes. But if you go to like the home page or you look at the style sheets or the JavaScript or anything else, you'll see it has a hit. So I'm not then paying for the caching and everyone gets it super fast. So I don't know if that answers your question. Fair to twit. It's a bit hard to read this all joined together. But anyway, hopefully that's good. Barbie, who the hell are you doing this when I should be sleeping? You know, it's even worse. I've got beer too. So, yeah, there you go. Again, South Africa. Congrats. What about Kiora Data Beach? Oh, I said Data Beach, didn't I? I swear I just started drinking beer. It's hard for me because it's always either a beach or a breach, and I do get the two confused sometimes. So Kiora, so for those of you just waking up to the news, this was actually news that broke during my day, which is a bit unusual sometimes, but it must be about 6-7 hours ago or something. News of Kiora broke, about 100 million accounts apparently, including mine, because I got an email from Kiora saying, hey, your data is in the breach. Now, of course, this was off the back of Marriott Starwood, which was only a few days ago, Saturday, my time, I think, which was allegedly about 500 million accounts. And then they said, oh, but only about 320 million of them actually had like personal data. it's a bit hard to sort of know where to start with these. I'm probably in the Starwood one as well, because I've certainly stayed at Marriott's and signed up to their, reward program. So I sort of lament the fact that no matter what you do, you're going to be in a data breach. And I do all the sorts of things that you would expect me to do. I use strong passwords. I use 2FA. I try to only give my data to places that I need to give it to. But for some reason, I was unsecure, or maybe I did like one thing years and years ago, but now my data's on there. And one of the things that I don't want to say frustrates me, but I guess it's just the nature of the business, is that every single time you create an account somewhere, it is usually there for perpetuity. So, like you go to catforum.com, that actually exists too. You go to catforum.com, you create an account because you want to ask a name question about your cat. True story, there are questions on catforum.com about, is it safe to drink out of the same bowl as my cat? So for argument's sake, if you wanted to ask that question, incidentally, the answer is apparently most of the time it's okay, but maybe it's not a good idea anyway. If you wanted to ask that question, you go and create an account. Life then moves on. You become a dog person. You never need the account anymore, but your data is still there. And catforum.com does ask for your date of birth as well when you register, which is just ridiculously, totally sort of pointless, but they ask for it. So you've now moved on. You've moved from cats to dogs. You're a decade on, and they've still got your data. And the chances of them having a data breach just feel these days like that it's just abnormally high. So the Cura situation, I don't think that there's anything sort of too noteworthy about that yet. We certainly haven't seen any sort of deep technical detail yet, other than to, again, sort of lament the fact that this stuff just keeps happening and I can't do anything about it. All I can do is sort of minimize the damage to me when it happens by having unique passwords, not sharing too much, etc., etc. But yeah, it just kind of feels like another day on the internet. Okay. Live with Australia, is that even a thing? Yeah, I guess so. All right, I'm spinning down the list here. Which beer are you drinking? You know what? I can't remember because I was running short on time. And I went to the fridge and I was like, that looks good. I'll grab that. I'll tell you what, when I open the next one, depending on how long this goes for, I will definitely show you and I'll answer that question. Are you sure you have the right recording source selected? Now, that's a very good question. Thank you, Maddie. So I have the webcam there and I have the microphone here. And I'm going to take it from your question that it sounds kind of crap. Whilst I'm trying to actually figure out, that was mute, that wasn't the right one. Whilst I'm trying to figure out how to select the right recording source, I'm going to tell you the story of why I'm struggling a bit this week. I was getting cable shamed. Apparently cable shaming is a thing. I have too many cables under my desk. And every time I took a photo, people would get upset and they say it looks like crap. So I unplugged everything. I spent a whole day rerunning cables. And as a result, not everything worked quite the same afterwards. The optical audio, for example, doesn't work. So I'm going to see, does anyone know, drop me a comment if you know, how do you actually change the audio source for the microphone? I thought I got it right because I didn't select the Logitech camera. I selected the USB input device, which should have been this one. Little echoey. Well, I've got no sound coming back, so it should be okay. Tell you what, if anyone figures out while you're doing a live stream how to actually change the audio input source, let me know. But at the moment, I can't see it. All right, let's do this. Did that tap? So say yes, the first thing tapped, if that tapped, or the second thing. Did the second thing tap? No, no taps. No, nothing. Is that a Lego Chiron? Yes, it is a Lego Chiron. Second thing tapped. Ah, crap. Well, I can get that out of the way. All right, so what I will do instead is focus on the camera up there, and hopefully the audio will be acceptable. It won't be normal quality. Again, if anyone figures out how to actually change the source, let me know, and I'm just going to go back to sort of trying to work through some semblance of what the actual questions are. Got to ask, because you're Aussie, how's your NBN? So for people not from Australia, NBN is the National Broadband Network. It is Australia's answer to crap bandwidth, which is to give us crap bandwidth. So the NBN maxes out at about 100 megabit down, and I know that there are people in like Helsinki at the moment laughing. You should see our beaches. So unfortunately, the NBN is pretty crap. They're basically forcing everyone to roll over to the NBN eventually. I'm still on Telstra cable, and the reason I don't want to give it up is I really, really reliably get 100 megabit plus. And everyone I speak to with NBN is like, yeah, I get 60 or 80, even though I pay for 100. So I'm reticent to drop it. Flip side is that I get a max on a good day of about 5 up at the moment. So this must be compressing the video at the moment, because normally I get about 2.5. If you go to NBN, I'm going to get something like 30 up. And I even spoke with Telstra just the other day. I called the business center, and someone who sounded authoritative said, yeah, basically there's nothing you can do about it. You just simply cannot get a high connection speed to a residence, even regardless of money. They said you could pay to run fiber from my home to the node, because I think we only get fiber to the node and then copper from there, but that'll give you 100. And I'm like, well, why am I paying for fiber if I'm going to get 100? So yeah, NBN. Okay, let's move on here. It's been a hell of a week in security. As Dan. Hey, Dan. Yes, yes, it has. Okay, then we hit the taps and the nose. What if have I been pwned as hacked? Well, that's a good question. And you know, to give a simple, serious answer, first of all, I'd feel like shit. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But secondly, I'm really, really selective about the amount of data I collect and the amount of data I store. So obviously, have I been pwned has email addresses in it, because that's what you search by. I have pushed back time and time and time again against the premise of storing other data attributes other than email. Now, one of the really interesting things, one of the most in-demand requests I ever get is, can you show me the other data about me in a data breach? And I, at first when I heard this, I was sort of wondering, why would you want that? So say Ashley Madison. So people would say, can you show me the data about me in the Ashley Madison data breach? And I'd say to people, well, it's the data that you put into Ashley Madison. Like, that's what's in the data breach. And I was wondering, why do you want to know this? Because you already know this. And the penny that dropped for me is that a lot of people really want to know what other people know about them. And I understand that. And if I was in a breach like that, I'd probably be enormously curious myself as well. So that's the sort of, I guess, the objective that people have. I'm really adamant that I'm not in a position to do that. I think the risks are just astronomically high, particularly for like one bloke running this in his spare time. So this is a really good case of where I have tried to minimize the potential impact of have I been pwned being breached by simply not having things in that system which could be disclosed. Now, I love this principle, right? This is like the principle of you cannot lose what you do not have. So if you think back to the cat forum example just now, I would rather cat forum not have birthdays, because if cat forum didn't have birthdays, they couldn't lose birthdays. And this is just like the most simple, stupid, basic thing ever. So in answer to the question, it'd be terrible. I'd feel rotten. I would never actually be able to notify everyone in there, because I struggle to send the number of emails I send at the moment. I can't send multiple billions of email addresses either. But then on the other hand, there is sort of the immutable fact that the vast majority of data in there is already out there circulating anyway. So if have I been pwned was to be breached, and the people with these treasure troves of data were to add this other thing, which was an amalgamation of the treasure trove of data, it wouldn't be quite the same as, I don't know, like Marriott or Starwood or Kiora or something like that. So that's, you know, hopefully that answer makes sense. Right click on speaker in the taskbar. Now, this is a good question. So can I go to my sound settings? And in my sound setting, oh, input, Microsoft Logitech Pro. Let's try this. Oh, that just got better, right? Waiting for it got better. So I know from looking at my laptop, there is a small delay. Dan, you're talking about Macs, mate. This is not helping me solve my microphone problems. Nothing changed. Now, so you put a question mark at the end of that. So are you asking me if nothing changed? Or are you saying nothing changed? So my input device in my Windows sound settings is now microphone. I'll drink beer while you figure it out. Sounds the same. Tap the mic. All right. How do normal people get by with computers? Seriously, like if I can't figure out how to set a bloody microphone, and I'll tap the other one, going to be the other one, isn't it? See, that's really, maybe nothing's tapping. It's like, where's the sound coming from? No, it's not a Belgian blonde. It is an IPA. I can't remember. Other tap equals yes. All right. So look, unless someone else comes up with a good idea, I'm going to persevere because I know that there's 104 people here now, and I do want to sort of keep going. I'm going to put that just over there and assume that it's going to there. I think people can actually hear this sufficiently, so I apologize for not getting it right. I did actually try to set it right earlier on. It didn't let me do a test though, so it was kind of like, you know how you select your sound devices and you end up having, for some reason, half a dozen of the bloody things, both input and output, and I thought I got it right. All right, moving on. Fix it in post. Yeah, I'm not recording the other one. All right, James Harold Burton, congratulations on Have I Been Pwned 5th birthday. Do you think Have I Been Pwned will be running in the next 20 years? Do I think I'll be running in the next 20 years? Crikey, not at this rate. It's a good question. How many records do you think will be in Have I Been Pwned in that time period? The truth is, with Have I Been Pwned, I never really forecast where it would be. I remember what I was doing, actually. This is the story. So when I was in my previous corporate life, and I remember I was in the Philippines because I used to travel there a lot for work things. And when I was there, I had downtime in a hotel, and I'd just been looking at things like the Adobe Data Breach, and I thought, hey, this would be really cool. Why don't I create a service? And also I get to play with Azure because I wanted to sort of see how Azure works in anger, for want of a better term. So I actually build something that wasn't Hello World. And I thought, oh, I'll just stand this up. And I was like, my field of vision was about 1 week out. You know, like that was it. And what ended up happening is over time, and this is also part of the joy of being able to run it as a personal project. I mean, I was going into corporate world every day, having to do big projects where you've got to forecast stuff out for sometimes years in advance. And then I get to go home, and like my relaxing thing was, let's just build whatever the hell I want, and I don't have to answer to anyone. So everything that's happened with it has been very organic. And I honestly can't think of a feature or a strategy or a direction that had any more planning in it than probably weeks at the most. And even now, like I've got a few pipe dreams and things like that, but it's not like next week you're going to see this massive feature that I've been working on for years. Even the stickers I launched today, that was a few days ago. I thought, okay, stickers would be a good idea. So I don't do a lot of planning in that regard. And I think if anything, that's sort of given me the luxury of being able to just adapt it and go in different ways. So in answer to the question here around what does it look like in 20 years, it is hard for me to imagine any reduction in the rate of breaches. And I say that for a few different reasons. So one of the reasons is that we are getting more and more connected devices. My freaking washing machine is on the internet now. I know I probably shouldn't have done that. It's on an isolated network. I was curious. I wanted to experiment. I got a message the other day telling me the door was open, which was really useful. So we're getting more and more devices. We're collecting more and more personal data as well. So some of you would have seen things like the Cloud Pets data breach with messages that children had recorded into teddy bears in their beds. So we're collecting more data. We're exchanging data more regularly as well. So think about how many systems you've got that interact with other systems. Think about interdependencies. So we've seen so many cases of things like scams running on Twitter because verified accounts have been taken over because there's some other app that has access to tweet, and then that gets compromised, and effectively it all flows from there. And also the other big factor is think about the changing social tolerances to sharing information and having it public as well. So I'm of an age where I first got onto the internet in the very early days of the internet when I was 18. So I managed to get to adulthood without internet or camera phones, which was probably very fortuitous. So I sort of had this recollection of not egregiously sharing everything with everyone. I look at my kids. My son's 9 years old. Now, he has never known a time without an iPhone or YouTube or social media or things like this. And his tolerance to sharing is naturally going to be very different. And I don't think that he's sort of wrong and I'm right or anything like that. It's just that we're growing socially and changing. And the point I'm making there as it relates to how will data breaches change over time is all of these factors are sort of combining to mean that there is more information than ever, more exposed than ever, and people are more willing to expose it as well. So I don't know if we'll be, instead of I think it's almost 5.6 billion records now. I don't know if in 5 years' time it will be like 11 billion records or 7 billion or 20 billion. I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see what happens to table storage if it gets to 20 billion though. Okay. Can you please make sure, I love this. I want to tackle this. Sound good to me. Can you please make these during a more manageable time for the US? It's 1 a.m. here. Can you all in America start doing things at a time that suits me? Because it bugs the hell out of me when I got to get up early. And like, this is the nature of the globe. And this is the chance that I get to put the boot on the other foot. I've had so many conference calls at like 1 a.m. or been up at stupid o'clock because people are on the other side of the world. So, hey, this is recorded. You'll be able to watch it later. Next. I hope that didn't sound too, yeah, you get the sentiment. Video dropping out, bit of de-resing. Welcome to Australian Internet. As a German, I can only say our internet is not only better than yours, even as we do not live near the edge of the world. Well, this is true. Now, in defense of people in Germany, in Europe and America and most other places in the world, you do have population density as well. So that the thing for us in Australia is we've got, I think, 25 million people in a landmass almost the same size as the USA. So yeah, there's just a really, really small population density. We're just on the little bits around the edge, for those of you in other countries. There's basically nothing in the middle except for like dingoes and goannas and stuff, and there's a rock. And what that means is that the cost of running things like telecommunication services is really, really high because you've got a small number of people over a very, very large area. You know, go to Singapore or Seoul or somewhere like that, and it's a very different story. So, yep, everyone gets better internet than us. In fairness, though, our 4G is blitzing it. So I've been doing some speed tests on my iPhone, and I've been getting like 400 megabits down, which is just insane. You don't want to know how much capacity I've got, how many megabytes I can use, or how much it costs, but the speed is actually very, very good. Probably because it's too expensive for anyone to use. What's the next big thing after Have I Been Pwned? Well, I honestly don't know. I mean, before Have I Been Pwned, I built a safer web, the automated security analyzer for ASP.NET. And then Have I Been Pwned was, like I said earlier, literally an idea I had on the plane, and I thought, hey, this would be kind of fun. So I never really gave that much thought. I have not given much thought to other things. In all seriousness, I do want to try and have more time doing family things, because I mean, there's been about 3.5 years of independence and just going absolutely non-stop the whole time. And it's been hard. I've had almost 6 weeks without being out of the country or without even having a night away. I managed to get to Sydney and back in a day last week and not have to break the run. So I'm really enjoying that, and I want to try and have more sort of, I guess, downtime. So after Have I Been Pwned, I mean, part of that question as well implies that something kind of happens to Have I Been Pwned, and I don't know what that would be. And like I said before, I'm just honestly not planning that far ahead. Dan again, do you think it will get worse before it gets better? Trying to get people to think about security day to day is like pulling teeth. So I'm talking to someone who wanted me to do a conference talk just yesterday, and this was someone in the financial sector in Australia, and we were having this chat, and it was kind of interesting because he was saying, you know, like we have trouble getting people to take security seriously. It's hard to get them to pay attention to it and to not necessarily even commit money, but commit like mental cycles to thinking about how we should be doing this. And we were discussing, and I sort of said, you know, it's interesting. I agree with you. Before an incident happens, it's hard to take it seriously. After it happens, organizations will throw any amount of money to try and get on top of it and show they're doing the right thing. And it's a really kind of odd thing. And I just don't know that there's anything that I can see that's going to change it. And I'll give you a really good example of this. We keep having all of these massive data breaches. Take Ashley Madison, right? 2015, 30 million plus records, people killed themselves over it, massive incident. And a bunch of people said, this will be the watershed moment. You know, like this will be the moment where everyone goes, we should start doing this right. You know, like we should, you know, actually have a security program, actually educate people, you know, think about the amount of data we collect, all these other things we know we should do. And nothing changed. Then we got to 2016 and we had Dropbox and MySpace and what else we have? LinkedIn. And then we got to 2017 and we had Equifax. We had Uber, which was really 2016, what we learned about in 2017. We're in this year, and I mean, just this week, we've had Cure and the other one, Starwood. So in fairness as well, like we don't know the root causes of those incidents yet, and maybe it was super sophisticated. You know, like let's not expect that no one should ever have a data breach ever. This is not the nature of software, and it's not the nature of humans. It's always going to be there. The question is, should they have had that under any reasonable sort of expectation? And I don't know about the ones this week. Certainly some of the earlier ones, like the Ashley Madison stuff, there was a bunch of dodgy stuff that went on there as well. So I don't think that we can do much more than what we are, and consequently, I don't think it's actually going to change in any meaningful way in the short term. Brian McCarthy, do you think Have I Been Pwned will ever reach a size where the usefulness of knowing you're in another breach is diminished? So I keep getting people saying, oh, you should just like replace it and just put like a yes there and stop paying for table storage or something like that. I don't think the usefulness will change, because as big as it's gotten, there are still people all around the world who see this for the first time and they go, oh, wow, like this is amazing. I had no idea. I had never seen the fact that I was in such and such a data breach. And there's still that sort of that light bulb moment for so many people. And I see it the whole time, particularly if Have I Been Pwned in the media, and particularly if it's TV and you get to see the reactions of people. So I don't think that that's going to change. And I think even for myself, I am surprised when I'm in a data breach. So the adapt.io data breach last week, the week before, the one which was the data aggregator, I was in there. Now, I didn't know I was in there until I got the email. Honest to God, like I did not look for my name in there because I never expected to be in there. I got the email and I was grateful to have the email. And I know that sounds weird because I'm like the guy running the service, but I would imagine that for most of you, if you were in a new data breach that you had not expected to be in, like you'd want to know that in somehow, like maybe that doesn't really change what you do, but in somehow that's important knowledge to you because it's your personal data. So I don't think that we're diminishing the value of the service by having so many data breaches. Troy, any numbers on serious attempts of hacking Have I Been Pwned? It's a good question. So a fun thought experiment, and I've been thinking about doing a blog on this as well. A fun thought experiment is just to like put something on the internet, put a domain on it, and see how long it takes before you start getting requests to like admin.php or other sort of predictable patterns. Doesn't matter if it's a PHP website or not. It's not personal. It's just crawling, etc., etc. I see that sort of stuff quite a lot, but if I'm honest, I'm not really sitting there trawling through logs either. CloudFlare does cut a massive amount of it out, and it's also very good at identifying abusive IPs. It's very good at identifying abusive patterns in a way that you don't think about. And my settings on Have I Been Pwned, I think they're pretty, I forget, let's check. Let's check. What does Have I Been Pwned say on CloudFlare? So CloudFlare, for those of you that are not familiar with what you can do with this, it allows you to set a security setting about effectively how strict should the web application firewall be. So if I go to my firewall and I look at my, and hopefully this doesn't disclose anything useful. Where is it? Security level high. So you can adjust your security level. On my blog, for example, I've got it as essentially off. Like I don't run my blog. Ghost Pro runs my blog. Just let the bots and the things come through. That's their responsibility to look after. And if it all goes wrong, it's just my blog. I'll restore it, or they'll restore it from their backup and we'll be fine. But for Have I Been Pwned, it's set on high. That will do things like you'll get a challenge if you're coming from Tor. I know that upsets some people, but a lot of malicious traffic does come from Tor. It will be much more aggressive at blocking things that look like malicious patterns. And as a result, I'm sure if I went through CloudFlare logs, I'd see more stuff, but for the most part, I don't really see things. Very occasionally, I'll get an alert because Azure's just gone a bit nuts because there is a sudden influx of requests that are coming through. But for the most part, I don't really have that problem. I think part of it, again, going back to the earlier point about, what if Have I Been Pwned gets hacked? It's a simple system. It really is a simple system. And where I'm a little bit sympathetic to the Kioras and the Marriotts and the Starwoods of the world is that they're running very highly complex systems with not just a lot of endpoints in the software, but a lot of physical infrastructure and a lot of like literal PC endpoints and all these different things that can go wrong. It's very, very hard for them to protect that. It's very easy for me to protect a very basic website sitting behind Cloudflare. Let me see. Once your password has been pwned, you can be sure it will be stuffed somewhere else. This is true. We're seeing a lot of that. Other than your fantastic Pluralsight training videos, thank you. What would you suggest a total beginner to look at for web security? I think we've probably got to differentiate. Are we talking about a normal everyday consumer, or are we talking about a software developer or someone in a technical capacity? Look, the consumer stuff, there's just a gazillion different resources out there, and frankly, a lot of them are a bit crap as well. Like, I remember I had to do the annual security training in my corporate job. Like, once a year, let's make sure you're doing security right. And the way it would work is there'd be a video, and you'd sit there and you'd watch the video, and then at the end, you'd answer questions to make sure that you had watched the video, and then the compliance officer could put a checkbox in her particular spreadsheet. So what you'd do is you'd set the video going, and then you'd actually get back to work. You just turn the volume down, and then you get to the end of it, and the questions at the end would be like, Vladimir from Russia sends you an email and asks you to transfer $10,000 to his personal account. Should you do it, yes or no? Yeah, okay. And this was a very sort of box-ticking exercise. So I guess the thing I'm lamenting here is that a lot of security training for normal everyday people is just terrible. It's just like corporate box-checking exercises. It certainly was for us. Plus, we see a lot of very, very outdated thinking for consumers. We see things like, make sure that you replace your E's with 3's so that the hackers don't know what they are and you meet password complexity rules. You rotate your password every 3 months, whatever it may be. So a lot of that's really, really old school thinking. I'm actually finding, here's a good resource. The NCSC in the UK, the National Cybersecurity Centre, is creating a heap of really, really good stuff for both consumers and builders of applications. And they've written many things that are very, very common sense. Things like let them paste passwords, like don't block password managers, things around password rotation. So I would suggest for anyone that hasn't looked at this before, go and look at the NCSC guidance. That's really good. If you are talking about how do we help sort of software developers get used to security, I've got a bunch of stuff on Pluralsight. There's other people with a lot of Pluralsight stuff as well. OWASP is always an excellent resource. So, like go through the OWASP top 10, look at how that translates to your technology stack of choice. OWASP top 10 is a starting point. It's not the end point, but that's just a great place to sort of get you set on the path. Was there going to be a birthday cake? I was not that organized. To be honest, I only decided to do this, I think, this morning. So I'm going away again next weekend, and family's coming, and it's it's not going to be too stressful, etc. But I've got to get a bunch of stuff organized, including really important stuff like getting my snowboard waxed. so I've been focusing on that, and I really haven't thought much about this. So I had not organized a birthday cake. I'm having birthday beer. I figure that's part of the way there. And then we got to audio stuff. Same, tap it, nothing, tap, nothing. Oh boy, it just jumped down a lot. How'd that happen? I drink beer while I find this. I just randomly got this. Since it came up earlier, cat person or dog person. So we don't have pets at the moment. And the main reason, much to my kids' dismay, is because we do travel a bit. And pets obviously are a responsibility, but both my wife and I are dog people. So we had dogs as kids. We would have a dog again if we were going to have a pet. We do have fish. The house we live in it's got this massive fish tank over one wall. And so far we've only killed them all once, which is not bad for like 3 years or something. So we have fish, but you don't, I don't know, like you don't create a lot of rapport with fish. Okay, try right-clicking. Drink a Pirate Life and the mic will be guaranteed to work. I do love Pirate Life. Pirate Life, for the foreign viewers, is an Aussie brand, South Australian, isn't it? And they make a very, very nice double IPA, which for me is pretty much a Friday night beer, because once you have one of those and they're in a 500ml can as well, you don't feel like doing very much else. That would not be a pre-AMA beer. It'd be quite interesting if it was. You should be able to see your webcam and mic was plugged in. I think we're done with the mic thing. How does it feel being a tech celeb? Yeah, all right. So, this is a really interesting question. Who would play you in a movie? Holy shit. I'll answer the first part of the question. So, I have very vivid memories. So again, like just for context here, I wrote my first blog post just over 9 years ago. And until that point, I had not done anything publicly facing. And I had these vivid memories at the time of people that many of you probably know or know of. So people like Scott Hanselman, Scott Guthrie, Joel Spolsky, people like that. And I always sort of remember, I don't know, like a sense of reverence where you look at them and go, wow, these people are at the top of their tree and they're really famous and they're, on the internet and everything. And the first blog post I ever wrote was about why online identity is a smart career move. And in that blog post, I said, look, I don't ever expect to be like a Joel Spolsky or a Scott Guthrie. And last year, I spoke at Pluralsight Live. I did a keynote there next to Joel Spolsky and Scott Guthrie. I had this moment where it's like, yes, I made it. Like, I'm there. This is amazing. And I guess where I'm going with this is that the memories are clear enough in my mind of looking at other people online and sort of putting them on a bit of a pedestal that I'm really conscious of it now. And I find it really interesting to go to conferences around the world and people come up and they want to take selfies. And honestly, like, this is like the coolest thing. It's like, who would actually want to come up and do that with me? This is like a really, really weird thing. But it's really good fun and they seem to enjoy it. And then they put it on Twitter and I share it. And like, it's just one of these nice things where everyone is just happy about the engagement. So, in answer to the question, I enjoy the interaction and I love just continually having this moment where I go, I remember exactly how I felt, let's say 10 years ago, looking at other people doing similar things to what I do now. And I'm really, really conscious of that all the time. Okay, AMG or GTR? Tackling the big issues in life. They're different things. So these are car things, noisy car things. I know that upsets some people. Depends on the mood. How about that? And yeah, if I had to pick GTR, and the reason I love the GTR, and this is becoming an old car now, it's about a decade since it actually first came out. This is the R35. And one of the things I love about driving this car is so many people want to come and talk about it. And it's not that I want to be the center of attention, but it's people come up and they're excited because they've seen this car on the internet or they've had a poster of it on their wall and they're seeing it and they go, oh, this is awesome, it's amazing. And yeah, very often people come up and I go, okay, you want to have a sit, like sitting there. Sometimes I take people for a drive and it's one of these nice sort of impromptu engagements. And in all honesty, I think I've had probably one occasion in 6 years of owning it where someone has wanted to race or do something stupid like that. And that's easy enough to ignore. So I've basically had nothing but positive experiences with it, much more so than what I've ever had in the AMG. So GTR. The earlier question, who would play me in a movie? I don't know. I would prefer to leave that to other people to make a call on it. Someone Australian? Or would you do the Stan Lee Hitchcock thing? I'm not sure what that is. Stickers, Sticker Mule is ace. Yeah, so Sticker Mule, Scott Helm suggested I go and use Sticker Mule. I think he's used them before. I would have really liked a way of making stickers where you could have just gone and said, give me 10 stickers and you pay $1 and you get them or something like that. But I just wasn't that organized. So I'm kind of hoping that people use this, particularly people involved in conferences and things like that. Just go and order however many you feel comfortable ordering with, hand them out. I'm really hoping people create some cool ones. So one of the first comments I saw today when I announced the stickers is they said, you should create a sticker that says, I have been pwned, which is a very reasonable thing to say. I think a lot of people would possibly quite happily wear that sticker. So I'm hoping I get some really cool pull requests with neat sticker designs. A question from Frederick here. I hear a lot about web security from you and others. Is it just me, or is it true that there seems to be more people engaged in web security than in RE and others? I think we all have our own sort of echo chambers where we socialize. People call it like InfoSec Twitter, for example, or you socialize with people who talk a lot about something, and then that becomes the thing that dominates your interactions. I'm talking about this after we've just spoken about the fact that people aren't really doing enough a lot of the time and possibly not taking it seriously enough. So I don't know that people are more engaged in web security than other stuff. I'd kind of like it to be a little bit more engaged, if I'm honest. Is it because web is inherently different, inherently more consumer-facing than others, and thus easier to talk about? I think that's part of it. Web is certainly the coalface. And in fact, InfoSec, one of the interesting things about InfoSec, we're just talking about people that I sort of revered in the industry. And there are people that have done just amazing things with technology, but you're never going to see them on CNN or the BBC or possibly in Congress or places like that, because they're doing something that is sort of behind the veneer of what touches consumers. And one of the kind of, I'll stop bumping this desk. One of the cool things about InfoSec is that it is something that has a direct impact on normal everyday people that have got nothing to do with technology. So you could create like the world's most amazing JavaScript framework, and your mum and dad are probably never going to say, "Hey, look, I heard the local radio station talking about your JavaScript framework the other day." That's probably not going to happen. And that is something that's happened to me quite a few times, not JavaScript framework, but InfoSec, where my mum will say, "Look, I turn on the news and it'll be related to some data breach or something," but you're on there, which is super, super cool. So I think there's something about InfoSec and web and data breaches which just reaches the masses like other things in technology don't. I'm sure someone's already asked this, but how do you get all the breaches that you upload to HIBP poned? Very good question. So in the beginning, with, say, the Adobe data breach, I can't even remember where I got that. I would have gone onto a forum somewhere and there are people chatting about it and exchanging it, and I grabbed that, and I grabbed Gawker, and I grabbed Stratfor and a few other things, and I would go out and look for them. These days, I don't think I ever go out and actually look for data breaches. It's always someone sending me stuff. So today, perfect example. Today I loaded a breach, and this was a Minecraft service. I'll make sure I get the name right here. Technic. In fact, Technic creates, oh God, what do they create? This is like a data breach from half a day ago already. Minecraft mod pack platform. Technic had a forum and a wiki that had a breach, 265,000 records in there. I was sent a data breach notification by someone who well, actually, I'll rephrase this. I was sent an email by someone who saw on the Technic website a data breach notification. They got in touch with me. I tweeted it publicly. Someone from Technic got in touch and said, "Here's the data." So this was, I think, I want to say maybe the 7th or 8th self-submitted breach to HIBP poned, where someone has popped up and said, "Look, we've been pwned. We'd like to give you, in this case, just the email addresses." There were passwords and things as well. I don't need those for HIBP poned. I'd like to give you the email addresses. You can load them and let people know. So, that's one place where they come from, the site itself sometimes. Other times, it's very much people saying, "Look, I have seen on a particular website, data is being traded. I've grabbed the data. Here you go." Now, the cases like that are kind of tricky as well, because I always make sure I do disclosure and I let people know, I let the website know, for example, that they have had a data breach, and this delays things too. But I don't want a situation where I load some company's data and the first they hear about it is people start hammering them going, "Hey, we saw you on HIBP poned." And they're like, "What the hell is this site? And what does poned mean? And why is my data on there?" So it comes from there quite a bit. And sometimes even from really bizarre places. There was one earlier this year where the Estonian police sent me data. And believe me, when someone reaches out and they say, "We're the Estonian police, here's some data," I do question it. There is a discussion which happens afterwards to make sure this person is who they say that. And their premise was, "We have had a whole bunch of people in data breaches. A lot of them have had accounts taken over, like email accounts taken over as well. We actually can't reliably notify them by email. By the way, this is not what we do. If you could put the data in HIBP poned, then we could put out an advisory, and even if you don't have control of your email address, you could go to HIBP poned and you could search for it and you could figure out if you're in the breach." So stuff like that just comes like totally out of left center, not expected, but here we are. Oh, no American. Evening, mate. So, Niall joining us from Norway, I take it. Few other comments. Where does the tension go in the future between tech and first to market, where products are shipped non-complete and not architected, developed properly? Been in tech 30 years and it's not got any better. I think there's an interesting premise because it's sort of saying we are shipping things which are possibly not fit for purpose, so possibly not fully baked, possibly have security vulnerabilities in them, possibly have other bugs and flaws as well, but usually not bugs and flaws that expose all your personal data. I just wonder how conscious that is. And I'll give you an example. Let's say it's Cloud Pets. I wonder if Cloud Pets were like, we'd really like to ship a talking teddy bear. We don't really have time to get security right, but we can be the first to market with first talking teddy bear and unicorn, and we can just like corner the unicorn market. And we're going to ship it anyway. When you look at the way things go wrong, in the case of Cloud Pets, well, they didn't have a password on the database. Like this was not a great big work item. It wasn't like we're going to have to spend a week putting a password on the database. Someone just stuffed up somewhere. And I don't think that they stuffed up necessarily because of a cost-cutting thing. When I look at the security vulnerabilities we build, take SQL injection. You look at SQL injection, you look at the good code, let's say it's a SQL query. Look at good SQL query, bad SQL query. There's not really any difference in effort. They're basically the same number of lines, it's just like one's parameterized. I don't think people are sitting there making a decision going, well, we're a little bit pressed for time and we want to be the first connected car, hello Nissan, or something like that. I don't think that they're consciously making shortcuts on security. I think it just sort of continually comes back to we're at this sort of unconscious incompetence level of competency. So for those of you that don't know these 4 stages of competency, you have unconscious incompetency, half a beer. Unconscious incompetency, which is basically saying you're not very good at something, but you don't know about it. And then you have conscious incompetency, where it's like, hey, we actually need to improve on this. We know we're not very good. And then you have conscious competency, which is like, hey, we're getting good at this. We need to think about it and we need to do it carefully, but we're actually getting good. And then eventually you have unconscious competency, where it's like, we're really good at doing this, but we don't even think about it. We're just bang, 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 writing good code straight out of the box every time. And frankly, I think most organizations are probably in that sort of far other side for you, left side of the spectrum, where they're just not yet aware that they're not doing this very well. Andrew, really, I'm sure someone has probably already asked this, but how do you get all, we covered that. I've got to start highlighting these things. Cone, did you prepare HIBP for an unplanned handover? What's my succession plan? It's something that there are certain things about how I've been pwned, and not just how I've been pwned, but my own personal security as well, that I'm a little bit cautious about going into too much detail with. There are some plans for a handover, but one of the biggest things that would be problematic, I'm just going to plug my laptop in before it dies. One of the biggest things that would be problematic for have I been pwned is that a lot of the feed of data is dependent on relationships with people. So, if I was to hand over to like Troy version 2 and say, look, there's someone else here, they're now going to run this, I don't think that they would get, I'm quite sure they wouldn't get the same feed of data from people because they don't have the rapport with people or the reputation or the trustworthiness, for want of a better term. In terms of actually keeping it running, basically, so long as someone keeps paying the bills, which are not very high, the thing keeps running. So I'm not worried about the sustainability as it is, but I think that it would be difficult to run it without me around in order to have the same feed of data. Look, I think over time this will change. And eventually it'll get too big and there'll have to be other people involved, or there'll be the right sort of organization that comes along and says, look, we can do awesome things with it. And something in the future might change. But at the moment, it would keep running, but I don't think it would keep running quite the same, just due to the nature of the flow of data. Okay, what else we got in here? These questions scroll in a really funny way. So someone there is very happy that I'm actually doing this at the right time for Europe. And I was conscious of this because basically it's either like I could do it early in the morning and the Americans would be happy, and I'd get Europe late in the night and I wouldn't be able to drink beer. The Undertaker Rye IPA, for those asking. Or I can do it this time of day and I can drink beer and all of Europe is happy and then America can watch it when they wake up. So, yeah, okay, I'm happy with the 10 a.m. thing. Don't forget the drop bears. Google it, drop bear aware. Beer o'clock in Oz. Yes, very true. Internet speed in Norway is pretty good. Yes, I know. Stop it. What else? Aussies did make Wi-Fi. Yeah, this is true. Aussies made Wi-Fi. Aussies invented the black box in airplanes as well. There you go. No question. War pigs are way down south. All right, so the context here. It's not got nothing to do with have I been famous. Some people might appreciate it. For some reason, parts of Scandinavia have really, really good American barbecue. Now, I've just spent a bunch of time in Texas as well, and I still hold true to that statement that parts of Europe, parts of Scandinavia in particular, do very, very good barbecue. Delicious. Now, way down south is a barbecue spot in Oslo, which is probably the best barbecue I've ever had anyway. War Pigs is in Copenhagen. What War Pigs has going for it, just to answer Niall's question, is it does have some really, really good on-tap beer there as well. Plus, you can go to McKellar Bar afterwards, which is also really, really neat. But then if you go to way down south, you can go to Brewdog afterwards. These are really, really important issues. So as part of it. Also, serious question, what will people use for verification when all that PII data is out there? The PII data that's causing problems with verification is knowledge-based authentication data. So this was what I went to Congress for, where we have particularly static KBA. So your birth date, for example. Ever get called by your bank or your telco and they go, hey, we're calling you up because you want to change your plan or something like this. We need to verify who you are. Tell us your birthday so that we know who you say you are. So this is static. You cannot change your birth date, and it's KBA. It's knowledge-based authentication. You know your birthday. Your mother's maiden name is static KBA, the first school you went to, this sort of thing. Ironically, things like your favorite movie are not static KBA. They're also shit security questions because my favorite movie today may not be the same as my favorite movie next month. So when all that data is out there, how do we do verification? One of the interesting things that came up in Congress, and in fact, one of the things I learned about going there is that there's like me and then there's two other people. And one of the people there was a witness in doing things, or an expert witness in doing things like identity verification. And he was sort of making the point that you've got all of these different ways of verifying identity now. Not all of them are good, but there are a whole bunch of ways we didn't have before. So think about back in the day, go back a decade. If you had to verify someone as a bank a decade ago, you could ask them for things like static KBA. You couldn't really reliably necessarily send them SMSs or emails or things like that. We really didn't have U2F tokens floating around. Biometrics was still expensive. So suddenly now we have all of these different mechanisms where we can do identity verification that aren't necessarily all good. We know there's massive problems with SMS, for example, but we do now have this channel that we can use, often in conjunction with other things. So I think the answer for this is that identity verification based on static KBA is just an absolute mess right now. And the only thing it has going for it is that everyone knows how to use it. You know, I mean, look, U2F tokens are awesome. If I went to my mum and said, hey, I got you this U2F token, this would be awesome. She'd be like, well, what do I do with this? But if her bank asks her what her birthday is, she knows how to answer that. And as much as I lament the fact that it's an awful security paradigm, I get the usability factor because banks actually need to work with customers. So I think that the answers are we're going to move more and more away from static KBA. Sort of goes back to the previous point of generational change. My kids will grow up understanding things like NFC and security tokens and all these other things. A combination of that and just having better technologies available that are more accessible as well. Banana Man, Banana Man, did you reach out to CloudFlare or did they reach out to support the project? I honestly can't remember. I think I originally, I remember what I did. I think this must have been about 2.5 years ago, maybe mid-2016. I think it was around about the time I put rate limits on the API. And here's the story of rate limits. I think I wrote about this publicly before. But I I was noticing that there was just a huge amount of traffic going to the API, which just didn't fit with the sort of ethical, responsible usage of it. And, with the benefit of hindsight, it's like, yeah, you stand it out there with an API, you can just hammer as much as you like. Well, yeah, some people are going to be abusive to it. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll put a rate limit on there. And then if you exceed the rate limit, I'll just return 429. So HTTP 429, too many requests. You can return a retry after header, which says, for argument's sake, come back in 2 seconds and try it again later on. And I thought, okay, I built this, job done, put it out there. People will see the 429 and they'll back off. And they didn't. They just like hammered the crap out of the service. And when they were hammering the crap out of it, my CPU utilization was going massively high because this was web API running in the app. And also my costs were going up, and because it was scaling infrastructure to try and support it. So I moved to CloudFlare because once I moved over to CloudFlare, I could start controlling traffic at the edge. And my implementation then, and you can Google this because I wrote about it at the time, was when I saw too many requests, the web app would take the IP address, it would drop it in an Azure storage queue. I had a web job that would pick that up, it would call the CloudFlare API, and it would literally blacklist the IP address for 24 hours at the Cloudflare firewall. So I managed to start blocking traffic at the edge so it didn't have to come through to the origin. Super cool, worked really, really well. Later on, Cloudflare introduced rate limits at that firewall level. So you don't even have to do this in code, you can just do it out there. But I think originally when I moved over to Cloudflare to try and do that, I was on the free plan. And then as time went by, they sort of said, hey, we see you using this. We've got some new features and things you might like to try. That will help us improve the product as well. And I was like, yeah, sweet. And they just basically started turning stuff on. So, I'm quite sure it wasn't me going out saying, hey, can you give me free services? I think it was just a very sort of organic discussion, which is, in honesty, this is the way most of these relationships work out as well. I frankly think it'd be a bit dickish to go to a company and go, you do good stuff, can you give me things for free? That's a little bit forthright. Musa, what's your favorite project you worked on during your career? If it's have I been playing, choose your second favorite. If I go back far enough, I think of two equal favorites. It's a very good question too. I had not prepared for this. I went to London in '99 and I lived in London for a year. I saw one winter and then I went, what on earth are you thinking? And I came home. G'day everyone in London. And when I was over there, I built the web front end for Kahoot Bank. Now, Kahoot Bank was, I think, the first online bank they had in the UK. I believe it's still going. I've got to check, actually. I think I checked it very recently. In fact, I asked someone, I said, was Kahoot still going? And they're like, what the hell is Kahoot? And apparently it was still there. Oh, it's still there. Kahoot. Oh, it's still there. Kahoot.com. There you go. Kahoot.com still there. So I built the first web front end for that. And that was pretty cool because this was it was kind of the tail end of .com times, late 99, early 2000. And I was doing the front end stuff, other people doing back end stuff. And of course, there was a whole team of people I was working with. So that was really cool because it was an exciting time. I was in a foreign place. We were going out doing all the sorts of stuff you do in London in .com times. So that was really good fun. And then when I came back to Australia, actually, when I was in the UK, part of what we were doing with the bank was we were doing an interactive TV implementation. And interactive TV was basically a lot of HTML and a lot of JavaScript. So when I came back to Australia, I worked for a company that doesn't exist anymore, and it's called, or was called, ICE Interactive. So I came back to Sydney, and I was building interactive TV for these guys. And we did the first interactive TV trial in Australia. In fact, we did it in Orange. Orange is a small sort of rural hub, for want of a better term. So some Aussies will know where it is. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but for some reason we decided to do it in Orange. And I remember writing things like we did a Pizza Hut app. So we partnered with Pizza Hut, and it was just a whole bunch of JavaScript and HTML running on people's TVs. And that was kind of cool. So, yeah, hopefully that answered it. Let me see what else is in here that makes sense. Happy birthday to Have I Been Pwned. If it wasn't for the site, I wouldn't have known that Tumblr let my password leak. Yeah, well, this is true. Someone recognizing family time. Thank you for that. Frederick, I'm fairly proud of my grandma and parents. They have started asking me whenever they encounter, do you want to run this program dialogues? Super cool. So much better when people ask instead of just clicking OK. So I've made my parents paranoid as well. So congratulations to you for doing the same. Does it matter? What about lessening the amount of data that companies require we need to give to use their hardware software? Very, very good question. So when I was preparing for the Congress thing last year, I wrote a blog post and I said, look, I'm going to go to Congress. What should I say? And someone gave me an awesome quote that I use whenever I see questions like this. And this person said, you should tell them that companies view data as an asset and they never view it as a liability. And this went into my written testimony. I'm pretty sure I put it in my oral one as well. And I think it's just, it's enormously insightful because having been in a big company before myself, the attitude was always like, get all the data. Let's collect as much data as we can because we can use that to better target people or understand what ads we should show them or whatever else it may be. And the attitude was always about what is the value to us as a company, never what is the risk to the individual if this whole thing was disclosed. So I would really, really much rather people start to ask, people building software, organizations, start to ask, what do we actually need in order to provide this service? And then once we actually collect it, how long do we need it for as well? You know, I mentioned the cat forum thing. They're still going to have your stuff in 10 years. Should this not maybe expire after some time? So I think that sort of again comes back to this beautiful principle of you cannot lose what you do not have. And I just love to see more of that. I just think it's such a common sense thing. So that was lessening the data. Paul, any recommendations for a computer science student wanting to get into the cybers? So I did computer science at university. I didn't get along very well with it. So I went and did computer science. So I started, and this is on my LinkedIn profile so everyone can see it anyway, and I appreciate it dates me, which is static KBA. But I started doing a computer science degree in 95, and there was no internet syllabus. So this was also, oh, my focus is just going really funny. This was also the first time that I got to see internet. So I was like suddenly seeing internet, and I was like, oh, I've got to go and build web because web looks super, super awesome. I want to go and write software for the internet. And there was nothing at all in the syllabus that allowed me to do that. So I eventually got through, I think, about 80% of my degree before I ended up leaving and going and doing something else. I'm just going to see if I can get my camera to refocus because oh, oops. There we go. We're back. Magic. So that was a little bit of a tangent to sort of say, look, and I'm sure things are very, very different now, by the way. A little bit of a tangent to say that I think very often formal education sort of takes you so far, but leaves a lot of gaps. What's quite different now is that there's so much supplementary material. So in 95, when I started that degree, as I said, there was nothing to do with internet available. So I literally went and bought HTML for Dummies, and I've still got the book. It's down there, like literally on my shelf, somewhere around there. Bought the HTML for Dummies book, and I learned from that. Now there's obviously just endless amounts of online material, not just Pluralsight, but all sorts of other things. There's the ability to get involved in open source. There's the ability to write blog posts as you're learning and hear from other people. Like, there's all these super, super awesome things. So I think the recommendations for a computer science student wanting to get into the cybers is, until you're clear about the path that you're taking, keep doing the computer science degree, but try and draw from all these other resources that you now have available. And, as you said, Pluralsight is one of them. But there's a heap of other really cool online stuff. I mentioned OWASP material before, heaps of blog posts that are really, really interesting. Go to conferences if you can as well. Pro tip, if you're a student and you're not in a position to pay for conferences, very often you can volunteer as well. So I know things like the NDC conferences, they have a lot of people volunteer, and they'll do things like just help corral crowds into the right area, and then you get to sit in the talk and watch it. Like do stuff like that and get exposure. And as I look back on it now, and I think about that first blog post as well, the opportunity to have public exposure with people that I could learn from was just super, super invaluable. So definitely try that. Doesn't matter. In the UK, a company doesn't even need to collect PI data if they are selling retail. Not quite sure where we're going with that. Troy Hunt, have you hacked the planet yet, perchance? Not to the best of my knowledge. It was the same plan in Jurassic Park. There was a plan in Jurassic Park to ensure the dinosaurs could not live in the wild. Same need for Have I Been Pwned. I do like the choice of not storing sensitive data. I'm not quite sure how Have I Been Pwned doesn't live in the wild like a dinosaur. That may have gone over my head. But yeah, to the point of not storing sensitive data, I think that's a very important thing. Have I Been Pwned 2019 priorities? 2019 is weeks away. Do you really think I've planned that far ahead? There's still stuff that I'm trying to move out of classic app service and web jobs into functions. So, for example, some of the data breach processing still happens in web jobs. And what happens is I load a data breach and I see my CPU cycle start to go up and then things scale, because web jobs are a really cheap, easy way. In fact, they're really a free way because you get them for free running on the same app service. They're a free way of sort of dealing with this. But now that we have functions available where they can scale much more infinitely and the cost of them is just stupid low money, I'm moving more stuff into there. So the things I was thinking of is the data breach processing component to move over to there. That's probably going to be the big, when I say big one, it requires me to take a day. Like, this is literally a day and I could do this. And this is the way I already do this for the hashed email addresses. So some of you might have seen that Mozilla has integrated Firefox via their Firefox monitor service with Have I Been Pwned. They then call a k-anonymity model, which means that every time I load data into Have I Been Pwned, all the email addresses go in just as plain text email addresses, but they also go into a totally separate storage account as SHA-1 hashes. And the SHA-1 hashes facilitate the anonymous email address lookup that Mozilla uses. The process to push data into the hashes is entirely function-based, and it's super efficient. The process to push data into just sort of plain text email addresses is still built on web jobs. It's been running that way since pretty much day one. I need to upgrade this one to do what that one does. So that's probably the first thing I can think of. It might even be one of these things where, like, I've got to sit on planes for quite a while coming up, so I might just try and plug out a bunch of that then while I'm traveling. I got no sound. Oh, geez. I hope we didn't lose a whole bunch of sound. I'm just scrolling down. I think we're okay. Maybe it's just a couple of people. Unmute. It does. I'm definitely not muted. All right, so I'm just scrolling down to make sure I haven't really screwed anything up with my sound here, and it doesn't look like it. I will scroll back down and check soon. So if I've screwed up my sound, and I'm asking if I've screwed up my sound, you're not going to hear me. Let's progress. Haven't seen that picture, Shane. I don't think that was about me. Just had someone in my office shout out, "Oh, Troy's answering my question. I wonder how many people are all watching this together without realizing." Happy birthday. Cheers, mate. Thank you. One thing you're very optimistic about in the cybersecurity world. I'm actually optimistic about other ways of authenticating. I'm not optimistic about getting rid of passwords. Like, let's not get carried away. But I am optimistic about using Windows Hello. I've got a Logitech Brio camera just there. I love the fact that I can use that to unlock my PC. Now, some people lose their mind about biometrics. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole unless someone else asks as well. But I love the fact that I can now put a much more aggressive key lock on my PC in my office. So my threat actor is literally someone who can break into my house. But I can put a more aggressive time lock on it, because when I leave the room and I go and grab a coffee and then I come back, I sit down and I press a key and I look at the camera like this and the light flashes and it just unlocks. And incidentally, it's not just a picture. They've got to have IR as well. I love that. I love that this laptop's got biometrics. My other laptop's got biometrics. My iPhone and my iPad have got Face ID. So I'm optimistic about the fact that we've now got a mechanism of authentication which is not perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect either. It just has to be much, much better than the thing we had before. But it's accessible to the masses. And I think that most of you would probably agree as well. When you look around your friends, relatives, people on the train, you see far more people these days authenticating, first of all, authenticating at all to a mobile device, and second of all, authenticating with biometrics. So you know it's not just going to be like a crap PIN as well. And we have all looked over someone's shoulder and looked at their PIN and gone, that's a really crap PIN. So I am optimistic about that. Definitely. What else we got? What is your opinion about the Australian Cybersecurity Centre? So I have had a bit of interaction with those guys. So the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, which is very similar to the NCSC in the UK, is a fairly newly formed department of the Department of Defence in Australia. They're the folks who are consuming from Have I Been Pwned to look after all the Australian government domains. I went and visited them in Canberra in August. I spent some time with the guys there. I spent some time with Alistair McGibbon, who's the bloke in charge of the ACSC stuff. I went and drank beer with them. And actually, here's a tangential thing. Every government person I've ever met anywhere around the world has just been super awesome, and they've all been the type of people that you want to go and drink beer or coffee or whatever your flavour is with. Like, they've just all been really, really nice people, doing very hard jobs, usually very, very professionally, and just really genuinely interested in making life better for you and I and everyone else that lives in these places. So that's the first thing. ACSC's got an awesome new facility in Canberra. It's super, super cool. They've actually got binary printed into like the metal plating on the front of the building. And I don't know if anyone knows what it actually says, but it's kind of cool. They, a little bit like the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK, are focused on how do we protect individuals as well as how do we protect organisations. They're doing a lot of super cool stuff under very difficult circumstances. One of the things I sort of lament a lot with governments is that every time a government does some really, I want to sort of pick my words here, every time the government does something really good in the InfoSec space, it's usually not something we hear about. You know, it might be catching bad guys, it might be implementing good defenses, it might be other things that either they can't talk about or they just don't make the news. Every time anything goes wrong in cyber in the government, it's like a massive front page story. Australia totally cocked up their census a couple of years ago. So we run a census every 4 years, I think, isn't it? Every 4 years. The whole thing was going offline, all sorts of dramas. And even years later, as other government initiatives have come up, people are like, remember the census? You screwed up the census. And the thing that I'm a bit conscious of is that we just miss all the really good stuff that happens, and our perception of government and InfoSec is shaped by what we see, quite naturally. But we see all the bad stuff because that makes the headlines, but we can't see the good stuff because it doesn't make headlines or they can't even talk about it in the first place. So I'm not sure how well that actually answers your question or what specifically you were asking, but my experiences have been nothing but positive with the ACSC. Just a bunch of good people trying to do good stuff for us, just like the NCSC, who I also see a lot of in the UK, are trying to do good things in London and thereabouts. Don't do candles with the beer. Okay, I won't. Do you set a digital time limit on your son? Good question. Not in a formal capacity. I do have him. In fact, I do have a blog post and draft about this. We've got a spare iPhone that he uses sometimes, and we've set that up to be quote unquote his. It's not really his, but he gets to use it. That's got screen time and stuff enabled on it, so I can see his usage. He also uses a Windows PC as well because he's doing a bunch of coding and stuff like that. And he's part of the family account. We get to see his usage on that. So we get visibility to it. But I think more than anything is that we're always present. If not sitting next to him, then we're walking past every half an hour or something. And we're, I dare say, probably a bit stricter than most in terms of screen time because I really want them doing creative things. I want them doing like physically creative things and mentally creative things. So my kids play a huge amount of tennis. We play tennis probably 5 times a week or thereabouts. We were doing this today for a couple of hours. We're in a very active environment, so they're outside a lot doing that. My son, you know what? I'm not going to have to worry so much about my son. My daughter, different story. She's 6, so we've got a while before I have to really worry. But he's just a really, really chilled out kid. He loves reading. So I'll sort of go downstairs and he's sitting there just reading books because he loves reading books. So I think we're, in some ways, we're a little bit fortunate. We don't sort of have to worry about that. We do always try and say, look, and again, he's 9 years old. If you want to watch TV, use an iPhone, something like that, like ask us. We want you to ask permission because we want to have visibility as to what you're doing with things. And when there's times where he doesn't, we're like, okay, well, that's it. you don't get it for the rest of the day. So, yeah, this is not something we really have to worry about, but I am conscious that might be different as he gets older, and it might be different with other kids as well. Lego car update. Well, it's finished. Next. Can you turn over my IRD in New Zealand for us? The password rules are bonkers. I don't think I can do much about that, mate. Sorry. Were you nervous of doing conferences, or did you prepare by doing Toastmasters or similar public speaking training? So I have never done a Toastmasters. My wife actually used to do Toastmasters, and she has gone on to do talks as well, which have been very, very well rated. For me, I did a lot of internal talks in corporate life, and in ways that was good because I got to talk to a lot of people, and not necessarily always technical people. In ways it's bad because when you're in a corporate environment, everyone's very forgiving. And what I mean by this is that if I went to a conference and I did a talk and it was shit, I would get bombarded by tweets saying, I saw Troy's talk, it was shit. If I did a talk in corporate land, it was shit, people would say, well, there was some good things. He got some areas to develop on, and it would be all very, very nice and cozy and warm and all that, but it wouldn't necessarily let me know that it was shit. So I think I sort of got to ease into it by starting to speak in a safe environment. When I did start doing talks, and this is going back, I guess, about 8 years now, I guess I was nervous, but I prepared like crazy. Like I would rehearse over and over and over again. And if you go and look at, if you go to troyhunt.com/recorded-talks, I think is the right URL, recorded-talks, you will see every single talk I've ever done that's recorded. And there's 42 there at the moment. Very convenient. If you go back and look at the first one, March 2012, that you'll see that I probably looked a little bit nervous. If you go and look at anything from the last couple of years, it's very, very different. And I think what's changed is not only did I get the rehearsing so down pat just over and over and over again, but I became a lot more comfortable with being impromptu. So, when I was talking before, I was saying there are people that we sort of look up to in the industry that we revere. And I mentioned Scott Hanselman was a good example. And what I really liked about Scott's talks is when I would see one of his talks, there'd be like a slide deck, and he's presenting from the slide deck, and he'd be partway through. And holy shit, like he's left the slide deck and he's gone to the browser. What are you doing, Scott? You've left the safety of the slide deck and you're now like in a browser or a command line window or something like that. What are you doing, man? And what I really loved about it was this just sort of impromptu. He could flick to different things and he was so comfortable doing it. And I think I took a lot away from that, where it's like now when I do my talks, I certainly have slides and they form like the foundation of the talk. But I want, and of course this depends on the kind of talk, but particularly like a dev conference, I want to keep going out of that context and going to something that I can show or right click on or show a network trace or something like that. And I think that that's actually really, really helped the talks because they feel more organic. And like I'm talking to you now, it's not scripted, obviously, because you're asking the questions. And I just feel that when you're comfortable enough to relax more and be more natural about the process, everyone just gets a lot more out of it. But that took me a long time. And seriously, when you look back through the chronology of some of these talks, some of them were hard work, honestly. GDPR, good or bad? Do I have to choose one? Okay, so good. I mean, unequivocally be good in the objectives of it. The reason I hesitate a little bit is I worry that people try to use it as a hammer for every single possible reason, and I worry about the way it kind of divides down the world a little bit. If I go back to 1 year before GDPR launched, so imagine May last year, and I did a course for Varonis on GDPR, and this was a good opportunity because it meant that I had to spend a lot of time reading up on it, trying to decipher as much useful information as I could and put it into terms that people could consume. And I did that, and their lawyers went to town on it. Like, they went through everything super, super cautiously. Let's double check it all, triplicate, make sure it's all okay. Varonis is a pretty major InfoSec company. They want to get this stuff right. And then they were comfortable. They went, yes, this is right, we're going to publish it. And a bunch of people went, no, you're wrong. And one of the things that I've found with GDPR is that people vehemently argue with each other about what is right, what is wrong. And one of the interesting things or realizations that I sort of came to is that as we were leading up to, it was May 25, wasn't it, this year? As we were leading up to that date, it was like, let's just let it happen and then we'll see. You know, you say this, you say that. Let's see what actually happens. And what I'm finding now that it's actually hit is that there's a bunch of really interesting stuff. Now, interestingly, I did a Pluralsight course with John Elliott. His Twitter handle is Without Fire. We did it, I think, 11 days after GDPR hit when I was in London. It's a really, really interesting course, and he is the DPO for a very major European brand. And plus, he's got a legal background and an InfoSec background, so he's kind of got the best of everything. And he explained things in ways that are beautiful because everyone can understand them. And it's quite curious to see what's happening now as it's rolled out. I've actually got a blog post in draft with a few examples, but I'll give you a really good example. You would see people saying there'd be a case where some company would send out a bunch of emails. In fact, I think it was Ghostery. So Ghostery sent out a bunch of emails to people about updating some of their terms and conditions related to GDPR. They made a little mistake. They put everyone in the to line, so all the email addresses were exposed. And I had all these people popping up going, they're going to get fined €20 million, 4% of their gross annual worldwide turnover, whichever is higher. So I was like, no, they're not. This is like reserved for the most egregious cock-ups ever. Like, it's not for something which we have all just about done, if not actually done in the past, let's be honest. And people tend to sort of go, look, we're going to beat you with the GDPR hammer into submission. And I don't like that because they're really sort of taking the spirit of that out of context. One of the interesting things that we're seeing now that it's hit is the way that extraterritoriality applies. So a lot of people have this view that as soon as you're European, you get some sort of a right that I don't get as an Australian. Now, first of all, that bugs me a bit. And it doesn't, I'm not upset at Europeans about this. I'm upset the fact that we've somehow divided down the world where because you're in the Netherlands, for argument's sake, somehow your data is treated as though it's more important than my data when I'm here in Australia. And I think that's kind of sucky. And to be honest, a lot of that is criticism of the Australian government because things like our mandatory disclosure laws absolutely suck. But I worry about that. And then for the folks who are saying, well, Europeans will get this protection everywhere, this is not necessarily what we're seeing. So there's a really good example. I have a message from the Belgian regulator, which someone sent me. So after the Adapt.io data breach, I mentioned Adapt earlier on, where a whole bunch of people had their data in there. A bunch of people made subject access requests to begin with, and Adapt in many cases went, well, actually, we're just the processor. We're not responsible for providing this data, and they didn't give it to them. One person did actually, one person that I saw managed to actually make a complaint through to their local regulator in Belgium. The local regulator came back, you know what, I'm going to find exactly what they said in this draft blog post because I think this answers this question better than just about anything. The response from this regulator wasn't necessarily what people had expected. Let me tell you what this said. And look, I shouldn't laugh because this is, we don't want it to be this way. So this regulator had said, it is not directly clear in which country Apollo is headquartered and if there is an office in Europe. In the latter case, then the privacy authority of that country is the lead in the story. In this case, it seems like the company is based in the United States, San Francisco. That would limit a process from Europe severely. The purpose of a breach is in the first place to change your password so the accompanying account can no longer be accessed with the old one. Now, this was, frankly, I think they misinterpreted this a little bit, so there are no passwords there. But the real point here was to say the company is based in the United States. That would limit a process from Europe severely. Now, people who sort of go, yes, but extraterritoriality, GDPR applies everywhere. That's fine in spirit, but how do you actually enforce it? Are you really going to be able to get a Belgian regulator to mount an action in the US against a data aggregator who siphoned up data from all sorts of places and happened to include a bit of European stuff in the midst of it all? Now, don't get me wrong, I fundamentally hate the way these organizations operate in terms of the data aggregators. But I also don't see how in any feasible way for a case like this, where, let's face it, the impact on individuals is not exactly off the chart. It's not an Ashley Madison. I just don't see how the regulators are going to be able to enforce it. And we're seeing multiple cases of this now. So I know, Simon, that was a very long response, and it wasn't a good or bad. I think the sentiment is very, very good, and we need a little bit of time for everything to settle down and actually see what it looks like in practice. Richard just tweeted you. You got an email this morning from Kiora saying that they've been hacked. Yes, we talked about that earlier. So yes, they have been hacked. Russell Crowe, would Russell Crowe play me? I'm not sure who you're upsetting more there, Rusty or myself. Probably not. They appeared in their movies in Cameo. Huh? Have you considered Redbubble for stickers? Someone else mentioned Redbubble. I haven't tried it. I did upload the artwork into a GitHub repository for free. If someone else wants to try it and have a link that they can share or something, let me know so that I can redistribute that. Someone, and I won't say their name now, crap, my real name is exposed here instead of my nickname. I'm not sure if that was about the fact that they've got a Google account that they were signed into, they went to YouTube and commented, and now it's associated to their name. If it makes you feel any better, person whose name I won't mention for your own protection, I honestly lose track of where I'm exposed, what identity I'm under. If I'm honest, I don't exactly create a whole bunch of pseudonyms or things. But it is really, really easy to do something like accidentally publish a photo to Facebook and tag it as public instead of private. It's so hard to keep track of this stuff. And again, I look at this and I go, if I live in this world day in and day out, as many of you probably do, or at least are very aware of it, and we can't get this shit right, like, what's it like for your average everyday person? Like, this is a hard problem. Technic is a popular Minecraft mod collection. Yeah, we've covered that. Question, if my site was hacked, I would violate my privacy policy if I sent you a list of users' email addresses. Do orgs send you email hashes, or is there another way to handle this? This is a really interesting question. And I do ask myself this question. Yeah, if you have a data breach and then you send me the data, is that not a little bit odd that you're sending me a whole bunch of people's personal information? Now, let's look at it two different ways. I'm not going to say no running Have I Been Pwned, because if I manage to get that data in there, then there's a whole bunch of people that I get to notify, and you could argue that it's for the greater good. I imagine that in the cases where people have self-submitted, they're sort of saying, look, it's out there already. If I now sort of give email addresses only, and in the case like today, for example, that's all I got. Apparently there are chat logs and stuff like that that are also breached. I didn't get any of those. I imagine they're sort of going, we're not making anything any worse. And there is an upside, which is that we now get to notify people of their exposure. So I think it's a very good question. I do definitely wonder that myself. That might explain why there's only 7 or 8 self-submissions, and I'm probably not going to get an email from Kiora or Marriott or Starwood saying, here's all of our data. I'd have a lot of emails to send too. Imagine that. Like if that Starwood stuff with 500 million email addresses popped up, I don't know how I'd deal with that. It'd be interesting. Is self-submission of breaches common? So for the person asking that, let's actually check this out. If I go to Have I Been Pwned, if I go to Who's Been Pwned, and I search for self-sub, there are 9 instances. So biohack.me, Ethereum, which is a forum, Land War, Lights Hope, Mr. Excel, Zvatska Magic, Technic from today, Truckers MP, and WP Sandbox. So yeah, there you go. More than I thought, actually, 9 self-submissions. But mind you, that's out of over 300 data breaches, so not common in the scheme of things. What else we got here? What are your thoughts on the bill on encryption? On the bill on encryption bill potential. This is the what's the word for it? It's effectively Australia's Snoopers Charter from the UK. The sentiment of the bill in Australia at the moment, which looks like it's getting blocked by the opposition, the sentiment is that law enforcement is saying we are finding it hard to do our job when bad people are getting encryption. Now, let's play devil's advocate. We'll play both sides of the argument. It is hard to argue that it would be harder for law enforcement to do their job if communication between bad people was encrypted. I mean, this is the whole point of encryption, to have privacy. And encryption is morally neutral. You can do good things, you can do bad things. So I don't doubt for a moment that it does make it harder for law enforcement to do their job. And then we look at the other side of it, where the privacy proponents will say, well, look, if you propose anything that sort of erodes the privacy that encryption offers, well, then you impact not just bad people, but you impact good people as well. So, my wife uses WhatsApp a lot to organize stuff for our kids. Apparently, a lot of the parents at the school use WhatsApp. That's end-to-end encrypted. Now, I don't think she's too worried about her privacy when she's organizing, like, a luncheon or something like that, but I want her to have it. I don't want those conversations being eavesdropped on. So it's a bit of a rock and a hard place. I think more than anything, tech companies have got to sort of play a bit of a role in the solution here. So I worry a little bit that tech companies are basically like privacy over all else, because I can't see that is going to lead to a good result. If you go to loggerheads between governments and the Facebooks and the Apples of the world, I don't know that anything good comes out of that. But I don't know the answer either. Like, we certainly don't want to see backdoors to encryption. And in fairness, the Australian government has been pretty explicit, saying, look, we do not want a backdoor encryption. We don't want to weaken that, but we would like access sort of post-encryption, say, to messages in storage or something like that. The challenge also is that they're not going to want to disclose, either them or the tech companies, the techniques that are used to actually access those messages, because that obviously is a risk in itself. But then all of us are going, well, we want transparency too. So I honestly don't have a good answer for this. I'm sort of seeing both sides of the argument, and hopefully they work it out in a way that works for most of us. But it's a bit of a mess at the moment because it hasn't been communicated particularly well in Australia, and it's really, really unclear under what circumstances could data actually be accessed. I think we all agree that there are circumstances where we do want data to be accessed, because there's a lot of really nasty shit out there that we don't want happening. But we're just not confident enough that the legislation and the bill before Parliament at the moment actually protects those of us doing good things. Hi, Troy. So this is Falcon Mick. I already made a tweet and GitHub post about it, but the idea has kind of got me excited. Would you consider selling a sticker pack of InfoSec stickers if I built a website to do so? I'll tell you what, I'll tweet your website, Falcon Mick, if you want to create a website to do that. Basically, anything that doesn't involve me doing more work at the moment, I'm all good with. Simon, seriously, digging who you are now, I'm going to be so much more shamed when I don't figure it out to know. All right, Simon, good on you, mate. That's my one first thing is nice. Please don't joke about drop bears. I've lost many loved ones to them. There is, if you go to Google, drop bear aware. Just do like a Google images for drop bear aware, just for fun. It's horrific. Anyway, where are we? Wow, this scroll sort of loses its position for a bit. With all these breaches, why would governments need backdoors to get the info they are looking for? Don't you think that enough data is already out there to sweep up all the criminals by now? Lol. Maybe the lol kind of invalidates everything before then, but in fairness, when we think about the breaches, I don't know that we've seen any breaches in modern times of the sorts of communications the government is really trying to get into. So, I mean, let's imagine it's iMessage. Apple has done a pretty damn good job of their security. We've certainly seen various iCloud attacks, usually due to credential reuse or social engineering or things like that. But no, I don't think, for example, that people have seen my photos that are synced to iCloud, as far as I know. They're not particularly exciting. They're basically all just like beaches and jet skis and beer, but yeah, they seem to have done a pretty good job. Please don't sell to Microsoft or any of the big corporates. Seeing good product go downhill or disappear totally. Mind you, that leaves room for some of Have I Been Pwned. So I assume that this is in response to me talking about what might we do with Have I Been Pwned. In all honesty, there's certainly been discussions. There have been companies that have come forward and said, we would like to buy Have I Been Pwned and do a cyber thing with it. And I've certainly entertained some of those discussions. Nothing has come to fruition. Nothing is about to come to fruition either. But I can picture very clearly the sorts of organizations that I don't think would fit this very well. Organizations that are very focused on monetization of personal data at the expense of individuals. There are organizations that would love to have all of that data because they imagine the targeted data enrichment of, that's just like shit all the way down. But by the same token, there are other organizations that are very focused on supporting individuals and supporting organizations. And again, there's honestly, there's not even a discussion at the moment about any of this. But I could imagine a time where the right organization would come along and say, look, we can actually take this, take it in another direction, solve things like the succession planning, like what happens to Troy if he gets hit by a bus or just wants to go surfing for the rest of his life or whatever. That might, at some point in time, something like that has to happen. Now, maybe that's 20 years, I don't know. But at some point, it can't just always be me either. Elliot Williams, he's happy about war pigs. I do love war pigs. It's like first stop in Copenhagen. You walk through the red light zone, you go straight to war pigs. There we go. Kahoot still sends emails, so yes, they still exist. Oh, that's nice to know. That's good. It lives on. My ophthalmologist worked for the CIA, inventing iris scanning. All right, that's a bit random, but maybe it was related to the biometrics. Is Supercar Showdown available on Git to install and run locally? So Supercar Showdown is a service that you can find at hack-yourself-first.com. It is part of the Hack Yourself First Pluralsight course, second course I ever wrote. This must have been 2013. The site and the code is actually owned by Pluralsight, and it is accessible to any Pluralsight subscribers. I think you might have to be on the premium plan. I can't remember how they structure stuff. So if you're a Pluralsight subscriber, you can access it there. That's why it's not on the likes of GitHub. But in all honesty as well, so this is, I think this was Dan again, Dan Bean that asked this. I kind of want that site to be used for people to experience making HTTP requests and seeing how the responses are and tampering with parameters and things like this. The underlying code is, to my mind at least, really inconsequential. I had to do terrible things to ASP.NET to make it behave as badly as what it does. So short answer, no, it's not available on GitHub. I also don't think it matters. Last, BTC. If the government can't secure their data, house.gov, is there any hope for companies? It's all people, it's the same people that are going to work for this company one day and then this government the other day. It's like they're all going to make the same mistakes. In some ways, it's actually harder for government because they're often more constrained by budgets. They don't sort of have the same ROI in terms of the money they spend on features and things like that. It's a lot harder for governments in many ways, but it doesn't. I just see no reason why governments wouldn't have the same prevalence of breaches and other incidents that private enterprise has. That seems to be the case. Right. You're fine on sound for the last 30 minutes. I don't know how long ago that message was because I don't put times on these, but that's fine. Sound is okay. Sound good. Do you ever think that they will cater to consumer privacy, whereas the consumer gets to build to their needs in a Dell fashion style, for lack of a better analogy? So this would be like if you buy a Dell, you just get to like pick all the bits and pieces and couple it together. I don't know how you'd workably do that in an InfoSec capacity. It's like, I want to have good protection here, but no protection there. Maybe the closest we get to that is, do I want to be able to turn on 2FA or not? In fact, here's an interesting anecdote on this. So Scott Helm at scotthelm.co.uk wrote just yesterday, dealing with account recovery in 2FA for Report URI. So Report Your RI is the project that Scott and I run together. It allows you to do CSP reporting as well as HPKP reporting and a bunch of other things. And he wrote here, we have quite a large amount of users on Report Your RI, and 14.47% of them have 2FA enabled on their accounts. So when we talk about almost like the smorgasbord of security stuff that consumers can choose from, we've got less than 15% of people that turn on the thing that saves your ass if your password gets exposed. Incidentally, 15% is roughly 15 times higher than Dropbox have for turning on 2FA. So I think the question about giving like a smorgasbord or a Dell-style model of security to consumers would imply that consumers can actually make good decisions about security. They can't. Okay, wait for a few minutes, came back. Yeah, okay, so people say my sound dropped. Look, I don't know why, but here we are. It's working now. Unless I scroll down further and then you say like half an hour ago it wasn't working. So I must have taken over my audio. Matt Davey. How do educate people that eventually you will still need the passwords behind the biometrics? Biometrics sometimes add complacency. I'm not quite sure of the question or how to answer it, Matt, but I think that the thing with biometrics is biometrics doesn't replace passwords, it supplements. I mean, you think about it, for those of you, I've got iPhones and this sort of thing. If you've got any sort of biometric device, there's always a fallback position. So you still have the password, but the biometrics change the way and the prevalence with which you authenticate with credentials. So, most of the time I'm doing the Face ID thing, look at the phone, log in, doing the Windows Hello thing on my PC. But when I say hard reboot my phone, or when my kids look at it too many times, I'm falling back to passwords. So I think people just need to understand the fact that biometrics, certainly today, are a long way from being consistently reliable, and that we need to have this fallback position. What else? Okay, I won't read that one. It's been good up until then. I respect that you respect government workers. However, when their own organisations seem geared against them making sensible change, how do you help them help themselves? One of the things that I think all of us have become more aware of over the last couple of years is that the way we receive information and news tends to be very biased. And yes, I hate to say fake news, but it's the whole thing of you see things on TV the whole time which make you question what you can believe and what you can't. And look, I see it the whole time. I don't watch mainstream news anymore because that just drives me nuts. But if you watch any news about particularly anything political, it's really, really hard to figure out what's legit and what's not. I do find with the government side of things, at least in my experiences, which admittedly have been limited and they're just around the scope of not just have been poned, but some of the other initiatives at NCSC and ACSC, I do find that every one of those experiences, I can't speak highly enough of the individuals, and that is an honest, fair income response. In terms of their organisation geared against them, I think some of the challenges they're having are things like pay gap. So there's been numerous pieces in the news about not just the fact that if you leave your government job and you go out to private enterprise, you're going to make, for argument's sake, twice as much money, which is a very attractive markup. But even things like, there's been a heap of pieces of you can't work for the FBI in an InfoSec capacity if you smoke marijuana. It's like, really? This is going to stop you from being a good cyber guy or girl with FBI? This is crazy. So I kind of feel like there's a bit of government catching up, which is often the way it is with government, right? I mean, government catching up on all sorts of other sort of modern practices and the way things tend to run today. So I really don't think I've done a very good job of answering your question, but I want to sort of reiterate the point that the way things actually operate in government do tend to be a bit different to the experience that's presented publicly. You said Ari is speaking NDC. So Ari is my son, my 9-year-old son. So if you look at NDC London, he is speaking at NDC London. So the way this panned out between me and the 103 people watching at the moment is our kids have 2 months worth of school holidays. Now, I can't remember having 2 months worth of school holidays as a kid, and I'm exceptionally jealous that my kids get it. And they have just started it 5 days ago or something. I was going to be at NDC Security in Oslo later next month, followed by NDC Security, NDC proper, not just security, in London. And I decided to take my son, my 9-year-old son, and go to Oslo a few days earlier. Scott Helm and myself are going to go snowboarding with my son and one of the NDC organisers. We're going to go and, sort of hit the slopes for a few days. And then there was London, and I was like, well, I should try and get Ari to do a talk. So what I wanted him to do is to do a lightning talk. So it's about a 15-minute talk, which is a bit more achievable for a 9-year-old kid. I'll sort of do part of it with him. And the context of the talk, in fact, you can go to the NDC London page and see him there as a speaker now, is it's about how he learned to code. So I've been not sort of religiously doing this, but doing this on a quasi-regular basis, teaching him to code, and also my 6-year-old daughter as of about a year ago. And what's really cool these days is there are lots of different tools and products and things that they can use in order to learn how to code. So, for example, there's code.org. If you've never seen code.org, just go into your browser, particularly if you've got kids, go to code.org, and you see all of these really cool exercises. So, for example, for my daughter, she loves Frozen, which is probably no big surprise there. So she can go to code.org and she can do a Frozen exercise where you have to like move Elsa across these blocks on the screen. And there'll be like Elsa and there'll be a snowflake. And the sort of screen's made up of a little matrix, and it says you've got to get Elsa from here to the snowflake. And in order to do that, you've got to move left. I know this looks right for you, but move left, and then move down, move down, move down. And you've got to do it like, 3 left and 2 down. And you drag the blocks and you're creating a series of steps. And then you run it and you see her move. And then sometimes she runs into like a snowman or something. She doesn't get to the snowflake and it doesn't work. And you have to debug the code. And what's super cool about this is that my daughter a year ago, when she was 5, so a 5-year-old kid who can't read yet can start to learn this programmatic process, and they can learn debugging. And then you get to things like loops, where it's the code.org says, okay, well, this is cool, but you've actually got to move 5 times to the left. Maybe instead of using 5 move left blocks, what if you have a while loop and you can put a count on it? So while the moves is less than 5, and then you do what's in the block. And then you only have to have the command to move left. And it's basically like the stuff that you and I would write when we write code, but it's wrapped into this child-friendly paradigm. So he's going to be talking about sort of the things that you can do to teach your kids. We're going to start with that. We're going to go on to, I've got to get this right. I think it's Code Combat. Code Combat. Oh, no, it's not Code Combat. We're still preparing this. End of Jan seems like a long way. It is Code Combat. Yeah, Code Combat. So you can go to codecombat.com. Code Combat is super cool as well. So that's another good resource for kids. And eventually we'll go through to the point where he's now creating a web page. And and it was kind of funny. So a bunch of kids in his class got picked to go to another school and do something which is their passion or something that they're good at. So some kids went to go and do math or science or something. He got picked to go to another school to do web development. I was very proud. Anyway, so I drop him off at this school and I'm like, I'm going to pick him up and they're going to be whizzy-wigging the hell out of this thing, and they would have just done like a full day of draggy-droppy. Anyway, I pick him up and he's got pages and pages of handwritten, in child's writing, penciled HTML tags. Like proper ones, like heads and bodies and things like that, and like stuff that you would write as a professional developer. And I was super, super excited to see that. They, as far as I could tell, hadn't actually built a web page. They'd just been leaving tags. So I put Visual Studio Code on the laptop that I let him use, and he started building a web page. And then his teacher was very supportive as well. And we have to do these, they call them NAPLAN tests in Australia. I think they do them every 3 years as a kid to sort of figure out, what are you good at, what do you got to work more at, etc. And his reading was exceptionally good, but his writing was like a little bit below average. And his teacher said, well, what you should do, because he loves coding, why don't you get him to create a website where he effectively writes about something he's passionate about. And he's in a superhero phase. So he's created this website where it's the most basic HTML in the world, right? But he's creating pages where he writes about the superheroes that he likes. And then he's embedding videos from YouTube and he's putting hyperlinks in there. And we've got him doing cascading style sheets. And without blowing too much of his talk, the final parts of this is that I want him committing to a local Git repository, and then I want him deploying out to a website. And the sort of goal here for people that come to this talk is I want you to see them going from a child who cannot read through to a slightly older child who is demonstrating the same sorts of practices that you use when you go to the office and you build real software. So that's what we plan to do at NDC London. That will be recorded, and of course I'll share it very generously then. You probably won't see this until a fair bit later, true. But in terms of your son's daughter online monitoring, are you worried about them getting around the security monitoring? I'm actually a bit excited about it. If I'm honest, like, wouldn't it be cool if my kids figured out how to get around my security controls? I think there'd be a bright future for them. On a more serious response to that, this is Vikström who's answered this. I've got a blog post in drafts, I've got a lot of drafts, around why you shouldn't install spyware on your kids' devices. And a lot of this is because these spyware services keep getting hacked. And, you know, then it's like everything from your kids' messages to their photos are out there in public. But I'm pretty sure there's a tweet I've embedded in there from someone, and it basically says, your kids are going to figure this stuff out anyway, and they're going to figure out how to circumvent it. And in fact, there's another one I got embedded in there where some kid, I assume, you know, more like a 15, 16-year-old kid, has said, my parents used to have this, I just worked around it straight away anyway. So I am sort of subscribed to the school of thought where, as I said earlier on, like, I want to walk past them and I want to see what they're doing. And I want to talk to them about stuff. And there's not taboo subjects, you know, they come home and ask all the sorts of questions that you'd expect curious kids to do. And there's nothing that I don't want to talk to them about, as uncomfortable as some of this is, you know. I'm sure some of you understand this. And they will see porn and they will see things that we would prefer that they don't see, and they will go through this. But I don't want to create this kind of curated world which sort of hides them from all this stuff. I'd rather be a part of that experience. But to be clear also, I'm really conscious that this is a very personal thing. And my views are probably going to err more towards the more liberal side on this than what it would for other people. But I also think that we're just in this really, really different era with kids now. My sister-in-law is a school teacher, and she teaches secondary school students at a girls' school. And like the things you hear about that kids see and do, and the things like a formal school tries to do to stop this from happening, and you're just going like, really? You think this is going to stop kids from accessing the things that kids want to get? So I'm much more interested in sort of, I guess, educating the kids and being a part of the experience than trying to block things outright. I have had some really frustrating experiences. This is now a tangential thing to, you know, how I want my kids to experience things that, you know, might be beyond their years. But stuff like my son's watching some stuff on YouTube, and he says, you know, I would like to be able to create favorites so that when I see a video about a superhero, I can favorite it and then I can come back later on. And in my naivety, I sort of went, yeah, that's part of growing up. You know, like learning how to create this concept of a digital favorite so that you can recall it later on. Like, this is a basic sort of paradigm of so many things that we do on computers. Let's do that. Oh, you've got to have a YouTube account. You can't have a YouTube account unless you're 13. I think it's still 13. So we had to create that. And now suddenly, I think he was like 7 at the time. It's like, you're 7. I've had to create an account that says you're 13 in order for you to be able to experience something that I want you to learn, but now you're getting shown content. He keeps saying scary clowns. He's like, why are there so many freaking scary clowns on the internet? So I'm just like continually finding these roadblocks where there's just really weird technology controls. A lot of stuff like COPPA in the US, for example, the Child Online Protection Act, where they're very strict about you've got to be this age to do these things. And it makes it really hard for parents to sort of tailor the experience for their children. Anyway, some of this we can skip past. Boy, oh boy. Here's a good one. Hey, Troy, this is from PowerShell Prompt. How does your family, especially wife, deal with all your conference flights, presentations, etc.? You recently tweeted about work-life balance, but what about the impact on family? Good idea. Good question. So, first part of the answer to this question is if you go to troyhunt.com/recorded talks, there is a talk in here called Hack Your Career. At the moment, they are in positions 8, 9, and 10. I've done that talk a few times now. And this is a non-infosec talk. This is a talk about how I went from sort of corporate life to what I do now. And towards the end of this, I talk about precisely this. So, how do you find this balance? And I think there's sort of a few things here that sometimes are a bit uncomfortable for people. So, for example, in the talk, I said, you've got to decide the price that you put on your family. And I kind of said, people get really uncomfortable when I say that because they're like, my family's priceless. I can't put a price on my family. And as I said on the talk, it's like, well, you're here listening to me. You're not home with your family. So we all make these decisions about how much family and how much work time. My life up until a few years ago was like pretty much most people, where I would go into an office and I'd work there all day and then I'd come home and I'd be tired and shitty because I didn't like my job and all this sort of stuff. And that impacted the family and I was away from, but I had to do that to earn the money to look after the family. So we all create this sort of balance. The way it works for me now is that as far as travel goes, I talk to my wife about all the travel. So, for example, I have got some travel. I've got some options in April, May. And I've now got to talk to her and say, look, I could go here and do this, and this would be the benefit. Excuse me. And it would be for that long, whatever else. And then that would lead into this, and it would make it longer, and I'll do that. What do we think we should do? Because if I go away, you're going to be basically single mum at home looking after the kids. But I could do things which then further our common goals as a family. One of the things that I have been doing that has made a big difference is taking my family with me more when I travel. So I spoke at Loco Moco Sec in Hawaii in May, and the family came. And Hawaii is a good place to take your family. I was in Texas last month before, October, and I took my wife. I will be in Canada in only a few days, and I'm taking my whole family, and I just mentioned I'm taking my son, obviously, to Oslo and London. That's a luxury I didn't have a few years ago, because I tell you what, it's not cheap as well, like carrying your family around the world either. But that's the way I'm trying to balance it out. And the other thing is that it was never meant to be for perpetuity. I'm going to spend roughly a third of my time away from home and usually out of the country. There are opportunities now that will help me go on to do other things, and by extension of that, help the family live the way we live, have some of the choices we have in life. Do we think this is the right thing to do now? And then we'll kind of ease it off. In all honesty, the hardest thing has been I left corporate life and I left the certainty of a job, and I went to independence, where there was no certainty, but there was also the potential to not have any limits on your capacity in terms of what you could do, what you could achieve. I wasn't going to be tied down to a spreadsheet about, for example, what could my pay increase be this year? Well, let's check the spreadsheet. So, that was really cool, but with no certainty, I said yes to everything. And now I've sort of got to go, well, actually, there's a bit more certainty in life. I can't say yes to everything. Like, let's try and find equilibrium. And it's something that I just keep looking for, and I keep trying to find balance on. But I think more than anything, to PowerShell Prompt's question, it's always a discussion with my wife. And you'll see her right towards the end of that Hack Your Career talk. Let's see what else is in here. There's a bit of inter-discussion with people here. Oh, why does it do that? It's just suddenly like jumps down multiple pages. Let me see. Why can't we get scroll right on Twitter as well while I'm trying to find my position? This is the other thing that's bugging me. I get up and I scroll to the top, and then it misses a whole bunch. And there's a little thing that says more, and you click there and it loads a bunch of other stuff, which is just really weird. Okay, that was the GDPR thing. All right, I think this will do. We'll jump into here. I can't read that one. Any thoughts on the Cura data breach? We've covered that earlier on. I see my answer. Yeah, there's a different thing. Cure breach was not an hour ago unless you did it again. Unless you did it again. Oh God. Look, I appreciate people are dropping in and out. Like that's, yeah, Cure I covered earlier on. Do you have any stats or ideas on how long a user have been signed up with Have I Been Pwned and still haven't received, quote, the email? I ran stats a while ago. I honestly can't remember what the figures are, but I think from memory, I know it's going to sound really vague, but it was like a significant portion of subscribers have received notifications. I can't remember the numbers though, so sorry, that's something I have to go away and write queries on. What's your stance on personal smart speaker assistants? I cannot justify trusting Amazon and Google as they've had a lot of privacy issues. Would you say Apple is best? Maybe. So for context, I've got an Echo. I've got one of the little Echo Dots downstairs. We rarely ever use it. My vision at the time was that the kids would be able to use this to ask insightful questions and learn things. And basically what my son does is he asks Alexa if my daughter sucks. And that's how it gets used at the moment. I would actually like to be able to use it to play music on my Sonos. So I've got one of the Sonos speakers downstairs on the bench. And that seemed like a really good idea, except the problem is that the Echo is made by Amazon, and Amazon doesn't want to let you play Apple Music through the Sonos. Incidentally, if anyone knows how to use your Echo to play Apple Music, which is the subscription I have via the Sonos, please let me know. I'm really conscious about listening devices. I mean, I just spoke earlier on about Cloud Pets and the fact that Cloud Pets sucked up all of this data that was spoken to it by children, and then they breached it all. I would put Amazon, Google, Apple in a very different category to Spiral Toys, the makers of Cloud Pets, who basically appear to be bankrupt now. They have untold amounts of money to spend on their InfoSec things, and they do, so far in my experience, tend to do a very good job of it compared to a lot of these other devices. I guess at the end of the day, if I kind of put my hat on and go, what's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is that Amazon has recorded everything that we've said in the kitchen and they've stored it, and then it gets breached. A likelihood of that is infinitesimally small. That would be the sort of thing that people discover very quickly because they look at the traffic of this sort of stuff. The impact would be, you got me thinking about all the things I said in the kitchen now. We don't have one in the bedroom, and I don't have one in here where I'm having meetings and things like that either. But I've got PCs with microphones, so here we are. Look, I'm not too worried about them from a practical sense, but I would suggest that if you don't need one, and I do question whether I really need one, then perhaps that's one of these cases where if you don't have it, you can't lose it. This is the most asynchronous AMA I've ever seen. Thank you, Barbie. I don't do it. I don't think I've done one. I think I did one of these about a year ago, and I asked Scott Helm to curate it because I thought people would be crazy. But no, I mean, everyone's very nice so far. I'm going to blow that now, aren't I? If you're given 3 bits of advice for the less tech savvy to help boost their online security, what would they be? Strong passwords, unique passwords, 2FA. I'll practice this. No, in all seriousness, I mean, this is where we are. In order to sort of satisfy those first two requirements, these strong and unique bits, I have suggested on occasion that people should just get a password book. Now, this blows some people's minds because I have had them come to me and tweet and say, here is a password book, haha, it's not even encrypted. But let's imagine you got non-technical relatives and they really couldn't get to grips with, say, 1Password. And you said, okay, where you're at the moment is that you're storing passwords in your brain, so they're crap. Like, you just cannot escape that. They're going to be crap if they're in your brain. You don't have very many of them because our brains aren't very good at remembering very many of them. So you've got reuse and you've got weak passwords. Now, if you were to take this book and you were to write them in there and you were to then put them in a drawer somewhere at home, your risk profile changes from someone who's been able to breach an account of yours via Kiora or Starwood Marriott or somewhere like that and get your credentials, then log into your Gmail or somewhere else like that. Your risk changes from every person out there that can grab hold of that data breach to someone who can break into your house. And the person who can break into your house doesn't want the book in your drawer. They want your freaking TV. That's what they're going to take. And if they do get in there and take your book, you'll come home and you'll go, oh, my book's gone. And you'll know that you now need to go and take precautions, as opposed to LinkedIn and Dropbox, where it's like, hey, 4 years later, guess what? Someone had my password. So, yeah, those first two bits of advice, really, really fundamental there around even just giving people a book, because it's a much better option than using your brain. And then obviously the second bit there around 2FA, two-step verification, whatever you want to call it, that obviously solves the problem of what happens if someone either gets the book or you've got a crap password and they get it from somewhere else, or you've got malware on your machine, or you get phished. Not that 2FA can't be phished as well, but it does make it a lot harder. Okay. That was our bits of advice there. Sneaky yes. What tips would you give a graduate intern on an entry-level cybersecurity role? It's very interesting. I find that people come at InfoSec from very different backgrounds. So I've seen people come at it from a much more grey hat, black hat sort of background, where they've managed to kind of find their way through to more legitimate means of making a living. Obviously, people like myself have come from an application development background. Other people have come from things like compliance backgrounds as well. So people come from lots of different aspects. I wonder if, for people looking for graduate security roles, if any role in tech is a good start, and then that gets you a foothold somewhere, and then you get to move into the next thing. I mean, by all means, if you can go and find some sort of internship in a security company or in that sort of capacity, then that's great. That's going to get you sort of closer to where you want to be. But I think anywhere in tech is a really good start. Congratulations. What other IT security careers that I could get into other than just pen testing? I think it's kind of interesting, because there's lots of different roles. And obviously, even within pen testing, there's all sorts of different roles that someone could play. Within InfoSec, we see things like, okay, what I do. I have never had a pen test role, but I do a lot of training. I do a lot of speaking and other things like that. There are security capacities where people build software products or sell software products. I mentioned Varonis before. Varonis builds a bunch of security things. 1Password builds a bunch of security things. So there are roles there. There are lots of roles that work with things like how do we help people do things like threat matrices of what risks should they be worried about in their application. We see organizations that just specialize in cleaning up after data breaches. They get a lot of business these days. So there are lots of sort of little niches within this bigger niche of security, which is part of this other niche, which is kind of software development and tech in general. What else? There's a bit of Dutch going on here. Has any company that has been breached asked you to remove them from Have I Been Pwned? I was actually thinking I'd get more questions like this, because this is a really good question. Yes, one company has, and I wrote about it at the time. It's VTech. So here's the story about VTech. VTech is a Hong Kong toy maker, and they had a data breach several years ago. And basically, here's what happened. A bloke in the UK found a vulnerability in their site. I think it was a SQL injection vulnerability. They found the vulnerability, and they were worried that the company wouldn't take it seriously. Now, so far, relatable. I can understand how this person would feel that way. What they did next is probably a little bit less easy to understand, which is that they went, okay, what we'll do to make them take it seriously is we will take all of the data out of the system. Okay, bad move number one. Bad move number two, we're now going to send it all to Lorenzo motherboard. So now they've not only taken the data, they've distributed it to another party. Lorenzo gets this data, gets in touch with me, says, hey, look, I've got this data, allegedly from VTech. I'd like you to take a look at it. So now there's three of us with the data. I look at it, I go through and verify it by contacting Have I Been Pwned subscribers in there, and I go, look, this is what's allegedly in there about you. Did you have a VTech account? Is this your data? A bunch of people said yes. Okay, legit. So I load the data in Have I Been Pwned. People get notifications. And this was after Lorenzo did communication disclosure with the company involved as well. So far business as usual. Sometime after that, I had a couple of interesting phone calls. One was I got an email from the FBI, and this bloke emails me and he says, I'm from the FBI. I'd like to talk to you about VTech. And I'm like, yeah, sure you are. And he's like, no, like I'm really from the FBI. So anyway, we had this phone call. And he was a very, very nice guy. Goes back to the point before about every time I've dealt with law enforcement, they're nice. Incidentally, I do remember at the time someone saying, yeah, they're always nice to you, to begin with. Anywho, have this chat with the guy, and basically they're just trying to figure out what happened. Because there is a very legitimate role that governments play in looking at incidents like this and going, okay, what's happened? What's the impact? What do we need to do to protect our citizens and residents and this sort of thing? So I had a chat with him. They actually handed it over to the Australian Federal Police. So I ended up speaking to folks in the AFP here. And again, they're all very, very nice people. Eventually, what ended up happening was a lawyer from VTech, who from memory was an ex-FBI guy, got in touch. And we had a phone call. Incidentally, I find that every time I have a phone call with people, they talk to you and they go, oh, like this guy's quite reasonable. That there's something personality-wise that comes across when you even just talk to someone, let alone if you can look at them like this or meet them in person, that tends to break down barriers. So anyway, this bloke says, look, basically, long story short, the bloke who breached the data has been arrested. So we've got him. We know he had the data. He sent the data to Motherboard. Motherboard have the data, and you have the data. We're trying to reassure the parents of children that we're in this data breach, because there were kids' photos as well. We're trying to assure the parents of children that all of this data has been deleted, and it would really help us do that if you would delete the data from Have I Been Pwned, not just the source data, but the email addresses as well. Because it's much easier to sort of go to parents and go, look, we just deleted it all, rather than go to parents and say, we've deleted it all, but there's this one guy in Australia and he runs a service called Have I Been Pwned, and he's still got all this data. And like that's a hard sell, right? And I kind of went, well, yeah, like that seems quite reasonable, because VTech has acknowledged the incident. They committed that they had notified everyone involved. I managed to notify my Have I Been Pwned subscribers. What do I care if I remove the data later on? And it gives these guys the ability to go back to parents and say, look, we'd like to give you some reassurance. So you can Google my name in VTech and you'll find it. And I introduced the retired flag. So even if you go to the Have I Been Pwned API, you'll see VTech in there, and it's flagged as retired, which means the data is permanently deleted out there. I nuked every single copy I had of it. None of that exists anywhere else. And there's never been another incident like that. So I've got this flag in the database, which is presently just on one record. Were you first reluctant to launch HIBP in case people took it the wrong way? No, I wasn't actually. Like I don't know. Like I just never sort of thought about it. It just never came up. I just thought it would be a good idea. And the other thing is, I didn't think it would be big. I thought it would just be a little thing that a few of my mates used, no problems. But yeah, it sort of became big. So I just didn't think about it. Okay. After a while using hardware tokens, what's your opinion as they relate to the non-techie? So here's the really cool thing about this, and just in case anyone didn't see this, I got U2F tokens and I enrolled in Google's Advanced Protection a few weeks back, and I haven't used them since. And that is honestly a very positive story, because, okay, for example here, I'm logged into YouTube. Once I'm logged into YouTube, I'm going to stay logged into YouTube. This is my personal PC with a pretty locked down machine. I'm comfortable with that. So I'm only going to need to use those tokens again when I re-authenticate to another machine. So my experience is really hasn't changed since when I wrote the blog post. And if anything, I think this is a positive thing. The more time that goes by and the less frequently I use those tokens, well, then that's great, because it just means that you need them to get in through the front door, and then you're okay. Okay. Been coding with my 6-year-old with a code bug built in LEDs for real-world feedback. Big hit, made a scrolling name badge for her to take to school. That's epic. So I love how much stuff there is out there now for kids to code with. And it can be super curated, polished stuff that you can get Swift Playground for iOS, which is, I think it's like Apple's taster drug, like to try and get kids building Swift and ultimately lead them through to building iOS apps and becoming part of the hordes. But you can go and get like really basic kits as well if kids want to actually go and create things with their hand and code on those. So there's it's probably obvious, but there's never been a better time to get kids into coding. One of the really cool things I like, and I tweeted this some time ago, and I just got a heap of likes, is my 6-year-old daughter sees coding as a privilege. And she'll come up to me and go, "Daddy, can I please do some coding? I've been good." And I'm like, "Oh, yes, you can." That's so nice. So kids actually love it, and I'm really enjoying seeing them experience that. Get Kylie to start blogging again. So Dominic, so Kylie's my wife. Happiness, satisfaction, engagement is very important. Most people don't seem to know anything about it. Yeah, so I'm sure she would like to. She is doing various bits and pieces, so in a sort of happiness capacity. So for those of you who have not seen what she's writing, what has she written lately? KylieHunt.com. Runs on Goes Pro behind Cloudflare. So she's written a bit of workplace stuff. Oh, that was a couple of years ago. So to sort of answer Dominic's question, because I've noticed it's on her blog here as well, the second last blog post that Kylie wrote was titled "The Aftermath of Spinal Surgery." So she has had some fairly major spinal surgery, which you'll see from the images here, that it wasn't because of an accident or anything like that. It was just degeneration of discs. And that's still something that she's working through. So it's been really hard for her to try and overcome the physical barriers to recovery from fairly major surgery like this, to kind of get over that, and then, kind of run a household, particularly when I'm away as well, and do all these other things. But she's still passionate about that, and she still does a bit of private work on this too. So, she's certainly not doing nothing in that area. What else? Do you think that vendors who produce dev tools, IDEs, like Microsoft, should provide better project templates to include improved security items like those covered in your Hack Yourself First workshops? Yes. It's a bit of a hard question. I'm trying to picture what it would look like. I mean, how would Visual Studio look differently to today? Maybe it would give more guidance. I mean, I'll pick something close to my heart. Maybe it would give more guidance. Say, hey, it looks like you're creating an ASP.NET web application. Would you like to add a content security policy on that? Yeah, I mean, that would be nice. I'd like to see more of that. I do worry that for developers, there's a lot of stuff to think about now. I mean, when I think back, I mentioned my HTML for Dummies book, which is sitting back there on the shelf. It wasn't too hard. HTML tag, head tag, marquee tag, dancing Jesus, spinning globe, you're done. Like, it was simple. And now there's just like a gazillion JavaScript frameworks. There's all these different cloud paradigms, and then there's all security stuff as well. So I'm just really conscious that there's a hell of a lot of stuff for people to take on board and think about here. I'd like to see that integrated more. I don't know that it's necessarily high on the priority list of the IDE vendors. Haroon Ahmed, is it possible to get internship in cybersecurity in undergraduate? If yes, what do you suggest? Internships, interestingly enough, and maybe it's just because it's a long time since I've been in university or in corporate life, are not really common in Australia. Someone's probably going to reply now and go, well, we do it all the time in Australia and I've just never seen it. It seems to be a very American thing, possibly a bit European. So honestly, I don't know, mate. I can't answer that. Well, okay, does it matter says, when was it you spoke with Congress and is it available for public view? It was November last year. It is available for public view. troyhunt.com/recorded talks. And then if you do a find on that page for Congress, you'll see that it was, it's number 7 there. So that is recorded. It's still there. It's available to look at. Someone called Scott Helm. What's better, .NET or PHP? Screw you, Scott. Next thing. Interestingly, Scott did build Report URI originally on table storage, which is an Azure construct, with PHP on the front end. So I think Scott is doing his polyglot best of actually taking a little bit of all worlds. So yeah, good on Scott for that. Just stop by. Gianluca Verisico just stopped by for trolling, but Scott Helm was faster. We'll just say Troy kept the good work. Oh, thank you for that. That's good. I'm sick of hearing about Bush and his family traders. Traders? Are they traders or traitors? I lose track. That's probably not really relevant. Elizabeth, what can you tell us more about yourself? What events or mentors or experiences are there that have been a part of the creation of Troy Hunt and his empire? That's a nice little idea. As we know them today, fun and serious stories. I remember, so my theory originally was I was going to be a pilot, so not a tech guy. And that was my theory because my dad was a pilot. And I guess a lot of kids sort of want to do the things that their parents do. And I got through until when I was probably about 15 or 16. And Dad at the time was sort of saying, look, like it was one thing to be a pilot in the 70s and the 80s. And it was a kind of a more of a glorious thing. But over time, it's something which not so much. And I was actually, so maybe something that Elizabeth and others don't know, I lived overseas for most of my teenage years. So I was living in the Netherlands for 2 years, and then I was in Singapore for 3 years. And it was while I was in Singapore when I was 16, 17, 18, that I started getting a lot more interested in tech. And this was early 90s. And it was a time where places like Singapore and Hong Kong, and Japan obviously, had all of this like super cool tech that we had not seen in other places. So I was fortunate to sort of have that environment. So I could go down to the local stores and see everything from, like super cool hardware through to every piece of software you could imagine. Always really, really cheap there. Don't know why. Didn't have labels on it. Anyway, and I got a job while I was at school, a part-time job with a satellite company. And it was basically just repairing PCs. It's funny, actually. I tweeted a photo of a box of cables the other day, and someone was like, oh, you got a lap link cable in there. And I remember the sort of stuff I'd be doing is like lap linking to transfer data between PCs. So I had an opportunity to get sort of surrounded by tech. And I remember at the time looking up to people like Bill Gates. Now, this was before the Googles of the world and the more modern tech companies. And I can't remember exactly why it was. Maybe because he was just like stupidly rich. I don't know. But maybe it was because he'd done a lot of stuff that really was changing the world. So I certainly looked up to him. And of course, what's really interesting now is I think a lot of people look up to him not because of his tech stuff, but because of his philanthropic work, which is super cool that, he's done good stuff with the money too. So I certainly looked up to him from that. I can't think of particular individuals that kind of shaped me more when I was younger. I mean, I mentioned other people before within the tech space that I look up to a lot, particularly as I started speaking. Some of the speakers I really like, people like Mikko Hyppinen, who I've since been able to spend a bunch of time with as well. Like, I love looking at people that do talks that I find really interesting, and often they're very, very different styles. So what I really like with Mikko's talks, and you should like Google him, watch his talks. He's done some good TED talks as well. Like he'll be doing these talks that are just an interesting story. It's not just about the tech. There's a narrative to it. And then he'll pause. And you're watching this talk and you're going, holy shit, like he's not talking. Like, where's he going with this? What's going to happen? And he just has like this stagecraft that just makes it interesting to watch. So I guess I've gravitated towards people like that and watched the things that they've done, and that's helped a lot. Okay, what else? Scott Helm, that looks pointless. Sorry, Scott. Scott's a good mate. For those of you in London, Scott and I are going to be doing a talk together at NDC London. I don't know if it's going to be the end of next month. It might be the first day of Feb. We do this talk called Everything is Cyber Broken. Not recorded. It's one talk of the conference we don't record. And it's if you come to the talk, you'll see why. But it is hilarious, and we're constantly getting told it was one of the best talks that people have gone to in the event. It's really good. We sit there and drink beer and tell stories, and it's really good fun. So come to London if you do, if you're in the area. Thanks so much for the phone. What else we got here? Stuff that I can actually answer. There's some stuff at Apple Robina on the fair left, northwestern corner of the store. That is for coding. So Robina is a store near us. That's our local Apple store on the Gold Coast. Yeah, I went in there the other day. I see they got the big store now because they had to expand. So that's there's some cool coding stuff there for kids. Follow-up earlier question. You might be right about the resilience of hardware 2FA. So long as we don't have to use them too often, it's okay. But that's not too different from passwords. Maybe from a prevalence of use perspective, that the problem is that we might not use the passwords too often, but we don't have to use them too often to have one compromised, which is the same as the one used everywhere else, and then someone's into all your other things. So it kind of kind of is different that way. Plus, we still have the issue of passwords being phished, whereas U2F tokens can't be phished. 2FA can be phished, soft tokens can be phished, hard tokens can be phished, because imagine you go to a website, it's a phishing site, it says enter your Google email address and password, you enter it in, and then they take that, and then they go, okay, now enter the token, and then you enter the token, and they go, yoink, we're going to go over to google.com now, and we're going to log in with all that stuff. So that is where U2F is actually fundamentally different. Do you think GDPR will have a big effect on how responsive companies will be if they're affected by a data breach? And do you think companies are making an increased effort to safeguard data? I think the answer is yes, particularly in Europe. It's having an impact. Again, the reason I hesitate there is that it just kind of feels crappy, doesn't it? That it's like a company is going to tell you that they've lost your personal data because they're worried about getting kicked up the ass for it. Like that's the bit that I feel bad about. I feel bad about the fact that they're not necessarily notifying you because that is in your best interest and they want to look after you as a person, as opposed to the fact they just don't want to get a penalty. But be that as it may, whatever the driver is, yes. We have seen, even with our notifiable data breach scheme, our NBS down here in Australia, that we are seeing a bunch of reports coming through, which sounds like they probably wouldn't have come through without having some formal construct, even though our NDB, so I say NBS, NDB is not particularly robust. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. GDPR, you've got 72 hours between detecting a data breach to report it to your local regulator. Australia, because we're really casual down here, gives you 10 times longer. 10 times longer. So you've got basically a month to say, oh, we had a breach, but then we're busy and we're putting shrimps on the barbie and we're like going surfing and chasing drop bears. And then eventually we got around to, like, it's just a bullshit period of time. We also don't have to report if the company has gross annual revenue of under $3 million a year, which incidentally is more than 90% of Australian businesses. And you don't have to report if you don't believe that it has the potential to do serious harm. So when catforum.com.au gets breached and someone goes, it's just usernames and passwords, there's no or no sensitive PII or anything like that, they don't have to report, except for the fact that everyone has used the same email on catforum.com.au as they have on gmail.com. So it's better than nothing, so it has improved over the last year, but it's still a long way short of where we'd like it to be. Scott Helm, skip that. Opinion on bug bounties. So I love the idea of bug bounties. And I think part of the reason I love the idea is I love the idea of having a formal construct for vulnerabilities to be disclosed. Which brings us to York City Council. Now, some of you, particularly those of you in the UK, would have seen the York City Council thing last week. And if you haven't seen it, just Twitter search my name in York City Council. And this was a really good case where they absolutely tried to throw the individual who reported a vulnerability under the bus. And it was kind of funny at the time because a bunch of people said, well, the person did find a vulnerability. They did see someone's PII. They needed to be reported to the police. Their API, when you loaded the app, literally returned other people's PII. And this one bloke saw it when he was proxying his traffic and went, you probably shouldn't do that. I'll let them know. Got thrown under the bus. Now, he's fine. He's got out of it. The cops have said, look, you haven't done anything wrong. The cops were actually awesome. See, we keep coming back to this, where government and law enforcement is just continuously, in my experience, very positive about this sort of stuff. And I know that there are exceptions. Let's not get into those. So the idea of a bug bounty is that we have a formal construct for that. I believe it also changes the ROI of vulnerabilities because we want vulnerabilities to be reported ethically. We certainly don't want people exploiting them, selling people's personal data. If you're interested in bug bounties, I did 2 Pluralsight courses with Casey Ellis. Casey Ellis is a mate of mine from Australia. He's also the founder of a company called BugCrowd, which has now become a very successful US-based Silicon Valley startup that's doing bug bounties even for the likes of, I believe it's the Pentagon. They just got bug bounty with. So we did 1 course on bug bounties for companies, and it includes things like, how do you convince the legal people that it's okay to ask hackers to look at your stuff? And we also did 1 course, which is bug bounties for researchers. So if you're interested in participating in bug bounties, Casey talks a lot about what that looks like. And it's not a bug crowd pitch either. It's like, look, this is what the industry looks like. So I learned a lot from that as well, if I'm honest. So go and check that out. Thanks, CIA. It's Wednesday now, so I'm off. Cheers, Joshua. How in the world were you able to keep up with tech being moved at a lightning speed? So a little inside tip, I don't keep up, I'm drowning. It's just, and I think other people feel this way as well, but there's just so much stuff. And honestly, like I've got this, it almost feels like a mental weight of backlog of stuff that I want to learn and I want to do. And I just can't. And I kind of do the best with the resources I have, but I spend a lot of time talking to people like Scott, who's in here trolling me. And, you know, he understands things like content security policies and certificate pinning and TLS and things in greater depth than what I ever will. So I spend a lot of time talking to people like that and trying to understand what I can. But I think the part of it as well is that, and maybe this is just like something that happens as you get older, but I've become more comfortable going, look, I don't know this thing very well. I don't know it very well, and I'm happy to defer to someone else on there and say I don't know it very well. I mean, I have the luxury of not having to tell a boss that I don't know something very well as well, so I'm conscious of that. But I think recognizing that you don't have to understand it all, and there are things that you can specialize in, and there are loads of cool people out there who will help you understand it better. I'm impressed at the effort you put in to avoid getting passwords submitted to the HIBP API in any way. Do you still get crap about you being a scam to steal passwords? This is taking us through to the end of the session anyway. I think certainly the end of my beer. So let me share with you something I got sent today from a Facebook group, which is just classic. I read this and I got to admit, I laughed quite a lot. All right, brace yourself for this. I'm going to put it over here so I'm not looking the other way. Well, this is the whole thing. Well, this is a laugh. I had two clients with the, this is your password, pay us Bitcoin, or we send you your porn web history to all your contacts email scam. Initially, I thought perhaps someone is just running a sniffer on a vulnerable ISP router to sniff plain text email, POP3 passwords and addresses, so I did a little digging. So far, so good. Incidentally, the email IP header is traced to Russia. Not that it means anything in today's VPN Tor world. Here is the thing. One very helpful website, and then in brackets, read deceptively helpful and appears high on search results relating to this particular scam, suggests you check if your email has been compromised on haveibeenpwned.com. So what this person is saying is they Googled and they had lots of people saying, if you're worried about getting scammed, check haveibeenpwned.com. Taking a bit of a look at this website, it appears incidentally, is just like, it's just me sitting in my room, like writing code. They are the one compromising people's passwords, and by an amazing coincidence, they also accept payment by Bitcoin and offer a free tool to generate secure passwords for you. I assume this person has clicked through to the donate page where it's like, look, if you found this useful and you'd like to donate either some Bitcoin or via PayPal, here you go. And they have then concluded that this is part of my scam. For the sake of the exercise, I put in one of my old email addresses, an ancient one that I know would have been in one of the old Hotmail data breaches database. Incidentally, I'm not aware there's ever been a Hotmail data breach per se. And several totally fake made-up email addresses that have never existed ever. And the websites claim they all have been compromised before in the past and suggest I install their, quote-unquote, onepassword.com tool to protect them. I'd love to see what those email addresses were. I'm really, really curious. I'll tell you what, if ever you're curious, if you think it's a scam, look, just like generate GUID@gmail.com. See how you go. You'll get 404. There's nothing there. And as for 1Password, it's like, after people search, I say, well, you probably should get a password manager. Like here's a link. If you push further, the website fails to give any details of where it got this info, which also seems to suggest they are the scam here. It's like literally listed there on the page. And then there's a big link here. It says about, and you go there and it says who and what and why and privacy and FAQs, and like it's all there. Further reading suggests that these emails are automated and simply email everyone on one of these hacked email password databases. Do you know how hard that would be? I send maybe 500,000 emails a month on average. And we go through these lists. I loaded one the other day. There's 44 million records. You really think I can do that? Oh, geez, I've just lost myself in the crazy here. Emails at every one of these hacked passwords database using the listed password as the bait to get your attention. This seems to match with the first instance I encountered the scam. The client perplexed as the password listed was one they used maybe 10 years ago but don't currently use anywhere. Yeah, because it's a shit password, and it's the same as the one other people used, and that was in data breaches, and now it's on the poned password page. I suspect now that if I was to check that old Hotmail address, at some point I will likely get one of these I know your password and browsing history emails with the password it used 20 years ago. Anyway, if you get any clients with this scam, tell them not to panic. Make sure they use SSL for their email and make sure they no longer use the password, and there should be no danger at all here. So I suspect this is what was being spoken about just here in terms of Harold's comment here. Some of this, I just get really crazy things. Like I'll get things, and in fairness, this is once in a blue moon, but you remember the crazy. It'll be stuff like, I put my email address in the have I been pwned, and then I started getting spam. Well, you could not put your email address in the have I been pwned. You're still going to get spam. Like it doesn't change anything. But, you know, here we are. All right, just starting to round out. I'm going to do this one last. Elizabeth, have you mentioned stats on either sign up with 1Password, Password Manager, after the start of HIBP partnership with them? How did you clarify this partnership ultimately to the grumblers and others? So that the easy answer is I've got no idea. So I have no idea how many people click through. You'll see that I don't have any tracking myself. I'm not sure if they're tracking referrers on their side. Maybe they've never given me stats, so I don't know how many people are clicking through. In terms of how I explain the partnership, it's pretty much all there in the blog post. And the position I put it on, and to be fair as well, like I went 4.5 years, I think, with no other branding or any other organization on there. And the thing that I kept getting from people is they said, I went to your site, I searched it, said I've been pwned, and then you said I should use strong, unique passwords. Good luck. You know, like what do I do now? And I wanted to drive people down the path of success where I'd say, okay, actually go and get a password manager and start using it and making strong, unique passwords. And if I had said that, it inevitably would have gone, okay, well, which one? And now you're left with this situation of, well, have I really improved the situation? So there's actually, if you do go to the front of Have I Been Pwned and you look at where it says 1Password, there's a bit underneath it that says why 1Password. It describes why I chose them to work with. And I did reach out to them directly as well. And the people there I knew already, but I said, look, you know, I think you guys would be the right fit for this. And basically because I've been using the service for, I think I'm just about to go on 8 years now, because I think it was January 2011. There were a few people that got cranky about this. There were some valid points. So I added the why 1Password bit with more explanation about why I chose them after I first launched it. So that was feedback which was taken on board. And honestly, since that, I have not had, I was going to say, I don't think I've had a single piece of feedback in probably the last 6 months. I think I might have had one. And then the person didn't realize that there was now a why 1Password underneath it. But no, that's it. On the whole, it's been very positively received. Non-infosec question, what is your favorite beer if you have one? Before someone mentioned Pirate Life, I think that Pirate Life Double IPA is still my favorite beer. That is not an everyday beer. Really, no beer should be an everyday beer. But that is not something you want to have too much because it's big and it's like 8%. All right, so look, I think I'm going to wrap it up there because I've been going almost 2 hours and 40 minutes and it is getting on here. So I hope this has been helpful. This should all be saved and recorded and available for viewing later on. And I appreciate everyone asking me questions. I honestly didn't know if people would turn up. I asked Scott to come along and ask sensible questions. Scott came along. That was all. So I appreciate everyone joining in. Thank you very much for that. And I guess I'll see you again another year. See ya.